Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Theist Helpline. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Our hosts, friendly and helpful hosts of the Theist Helpline, in alphabetical order, are Amy Newman, who is known for her trademark slogan, Sending Love, is a professional comedian and skeptic who hosts debates, interviews, and conversations on her YouTube channel. She also creates educational and other important content. IX is a Tom and Boxes subscriber and former atheist community of Discord admin who enjoys long walks through evolutionary, biology-inspired computer science, archaeological academic biblical criticism, and so on. Jack Burton, it's all in the reflexes, is a self-described, middle-aged, college-educated nobody who drives the Pork Chop Express in his spare time. He's a deist and is mostly non-committal to philosophical stances. Jefferson Spatchcock is an atheist inquisitor and intellectual who has particular expertise in thoroughly analyzing and reviewing debates, often from the comfort of his genuine lazy-boy chair. J.L. Warren is an atheist activist, educator, and entertainer. He runs the Bridge the Divide YouTube channel where he addresses irrational beliefs, the irrational behaviors that often follow, the societal divides they create, and how those divides can be bridged with education, rationality, and reason. J. Mike is one of the co-hosts of the Talk Heathen show. King Xerxes is an atheist activist and political commentator who has extensive knowledge of the Holy Bible and Christianity and the history surrounding it. Mobarak Abusharifah is an ex-Muslim who grew up in Saudi Arabia with knowledge of Islam and world history. He's also a co-host on Peter DeTukker's YouTube shows. Peter DeTukker is an atheist epistemologist from the Netherlands, inspired by Arn Ra, Seth Andrews, Anthony Magnabosco, and others. He started a YouTube channel that mainly focuses on religion, but also hosts shows on other topics, including interviews with other content creators and atheists he meets through social media. I'm Randolf Richardson. I'm an atheist activist from British Columbia, Canada. I advocate for the equality and normalization of people who don't believe in deities, which entails advocating for fair justice, freedom, and critical thinking. I'm also the founding president of the Canadian Atheists, a national organization that promotes atheism and agnosticism as culturally common aspects of Canadian society. Taco, the visionary organizer of the Theist Helpline, is a #1 Discord debater who has never lost a debate in his life. TJump, Tom Jump, is the founder of an atheist church called the Church of the Best Possible World, which is based on his model of objective morality. It has the goal of doing what Abrahamic churches should be doing but are not, helping people by providing affordable housing. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Good morning to everyone. Did anybody have anything they wanted to announce before we began? I'll just quickly mention that we had Canada Day in Canada here yesterday, July 1st. We celebrate that every year. And I know that July 4th is coming up for Americans. So happy 4th of July to all the Americans for that coming up. And happy Canada Day to everyone to make up for yesterday. And I see someone in our live audience, Beamsy, is writing, "Blame Canada." That's a great South Park reference to start the show with. Hello, Amy, Taco, IX, and TJump. How are all of you?
What's up, Randolph? Happy Canada Day. Or it was.
Thank you. Did anybody have anything they wanted to cover before we start bringing people up from the audience?
Sure, yeah. If anybody wants to raise your hand, feel free to raise your hand. We'll go pretty much in order. We're going to try to get everyone up and give everyone a fair shot. But yeah, y'all can talk. I was just letting them know.
This is the week. I feel it. Prove to us that God exists.
I mean, pretty much every theist that isn't super dishonest will say something along the lines of they can't prove a God exists, but they believe, right?
What about the dishonest ones?
I mean, it's unsound every time, right?
Me and Matt will look at the trees. I'm surprised at how often we kind of get that fact. Though the cosmological arguments have been hot lately.
Yeah, I guess they're making the rounds. I find it interesting that the cosmological argument seems to have its roots in among Islamic apologists, and it got taken up by Christians who've basically tried to make it their own. I guess Dr. William Lane Craig has made some modifications to it, but for the most part, it's pretty much the same argument.
Well, he made it popular, I think, among modern day Christians. I think that the Kalam, like you were saying, has been pushed by Muslims for a while now, and it was set forth in Dawa circles. But what happens is eventually, they just want to argue deistic type of arguments anyway. So I think that's what wins over the skeptics, I think, in their view.
I spotted somebody. I'm inviting up Legend right now, but I spotted somebody in the audience I'd like to talk with. So I found one of those theists we were talking about. So 676 Mike in his bio has the most basic fact of all facts is the existence of the triune God. That sounds like a fun conversation. But I invited you up, Legend.
Triune God. It's like buying a 3-pack at Walgreens.
Legend, you got to hit the green button to pull yourself up. It'll be at the top of your screen.
It's 3 for the price of 1, Amy.
Exactly.
Well, hopefully the Legend will join us and we'll hear what they have to say about the triune God. That will be interesting.
Anybody want to cover why they think the triune God is not a thing while we wait for somebody to raise their hand?
I more specifically don't believe in a mind like God. Like if there was a God out there that said very specifically, I come in 3 parts and it has to be 3, and I very specifically have to have a son. This is me and my son. I guess I would take it on board. It would just be, and then they just throw in the holy power because everything has to come in 3s.
100% God, 100% man, 100% spirit. That's 300%.
Not in bed.
Usually the argument about the triune God is one had amongst Christians and Arianists and other types of sects. That's why they had the Council of Nicaea in the first place, was to argue over Christology stuff. So if someone is going to make an argument for the triune God to non-theists, seems like they're already starting at the assumption there's even a God in the first place, which I'm not sure we'll get to that.
Yeah, he sounds like a precept. I'm pretty sure that's a precept. If you're saying that's the first fact of all, it's probably a precept.
That makes sense. It usually is the case.
Speaking of which, you did great in that video, Tom. I enjoyed that with I forget what his name was, but a specific presuppositionalist.
It's the Seth Bloom. I've been doing precept all week. Been playing my old precept videos on my TJump gaming channel and then doing reviews on my TJump channel. So yesterday was Seth Bloomberg. The day before that was the Tag podcast. The day before that was Darth Dawkins.
I do have to also just point out, I had like a counter. I do this with most precepts, but they were going hard on the amount of questions they like to ask versus the amount of questions they let you ask. You actually did well. The fact that you were able even to ask any questions was impressive.
That's a valid point.
I think the only person who mostly didn't let me answer questions was Jay Dyer. He interrupted more than Darth Dawkins. Impressive accomplishment.
That's a feat.
He must have felt so intimidated if he was doing that.
Yep, it was obvious. He was scared.
If anybody would like to come up and chat with us, you're welcome to raise your hand. We've got an open line right now.
And if not, I'll just keep on saying God does not exist.
Totally fine.
It seems to be a point of contention depending which Christian you're talking to. Some of them see the Trinity as 3 separate entities, and others see it as a combination of just one. And welcome, Abyssional. I'm Abyssional. I'm probably saying your name incorrectly. Please help me
It's
out.
a made-up word. There's no correct way to say it.
Okay. Well, welcome.
You're good.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. And how are you today?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
Good. What have you got for us?
Okay, so just to clarify at the start, I'm an atheist, but I'm not an anti-theist, in that I acknowledge that there is a possibility that God could exist, but I don't see evidence of it, therefore I don't believe in it. But
Okay.
I'm just wondering if you guys overall believe that there is any possibility that God could exist.
I'm not.
Depends.
I'm not able to rule it out, so I remain open to it. Like there are certain deities when a number of their characteristics are shared with me, I may see a paradox or something, and then I can discount those. I have to kind of look at them on a case by case basis, but or if there's some other reason. But normally I go in open and into these things and think, okay, let's hear what it is.
Okay, yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. That was more or less it for me, because for me, my perspective is we won't really know until we die, right? We'll either turn into nothing or there is something, and there isn't really much to it other than that.
Well,
I think
there
it's
could be an afterlife without a god.
well, no. I'm saying that would be included under there is something, right? But I'm saying we won't know what it is, whether there's an afterlife with God, without God, or if there's nothing. We won't know until we die.
There's two problems with that. One is that even if you die, you could still be in like a sub-universe that isn't the true one, so you still wouldn't know. And there's
That's possible, yeah.
ways to have evidence before you die too.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, it's just the kind of thing where there's. I guess my overall point is there isn't really a way that we could get an actual definitive answer to that ever, really. I guess, and it's again, I don't really take the side of God of the gaps. Let me just say everything that I don't understand is God, but it's more along the lines of interesting. I wonder what happens if this is in fact a possibility.
Do you find it suspicious that there is a requirement of dying before you can find out for sure?
Oh, of course. Like my personal belief, right? This is independent from God, is that I believe that there is an afterlife simply because we right now are conscious of the fact that we exist. So what I mean by that is if we weren't aware, or if our consciousness, our awareness of our existence went away after we died, then how would we be able to, say, log or record that through our memories while we were alive if it all goes away when we die?
Are you talking about near-death experiences?
No. So what I'm saying is, let's say you open a book, right? You read through 50 pages and put a bookmark in the book. So the save state for that book is 50 pages, right? You lived for 50 years. Your save state is 50 years. You have 50 years of experiences. But if you pull the bookmark out of that book and close it, the book itself, obviously it has no awareness that it was ever at 50 pages. And you have no awareness that the book was at 50 pages, right? That's kind of a more obtuse way of saying it. I didn't really articulate that well.
I don't get the analogy.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't articulate it well. Apologies for that.
I want to give a shot. So let me see if I am understanding your position correctly. So there's a movie on the screen, and the movie has scenes. Even if the movie ends and you're in the movie, so you essentially die. The movie, the disc still exists, so your life is saved somewhere, some content, somewhere in reality.
Yes, that's a much better way of articulating it. Thank you.
Are you just saying that if time travel or something like that from a physics perspective exists, then the ability to go back to the point where you were alive might be possible?
No, not quite that. Just in the sense that your existence is logged like that VHS tape, right? So if it wasn't logged, how would you be aware that you existed? How would you, even if you existed, how would you be aware of it, right?
I think he's talking more something like B theory of time, where
Yeah, that's what I
all
thought.
moments of time exist simultaneously, and so you and all of your time states exist somewhere in the history of time, no matter what. Your existence doesn't cease in the metaverse of time or whatever, and so you are there somewhere, even if your present moment has passed and you're no longer in the present moment. Your existence is still there in the past moment, wherever that is So you still technically exist somewhere.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. And again, I don't take this super seriously. It's more just like food for thought and me being interested in things. So I'm sure there are plenty of angry theists waiting to hop up. So thank you guys. I appreciate you entertaining my shower thoughts.
Hey, thanks for coming up. If anybody else would like to come chat with us, we've got an open line. You're welcome to raise your hand.
Also, just want to put, I agree with everything you guys said. Just want to put out there that possibility and impossibility both have to be demonstrated. And so I am definitely open to the idea that a God could exist, but I don't know if it's possible or impossible because I don't have a God to use the sample.
I don't think I would agree with that. I don't think, because possibility, I don't know what it means for possibility to be demonstrated other than there is no logical contradiction. If something has no logical contradiction, then essentially you've demonstrated it's possible. Well, it sounds like a Dilettanteism that I don't think is in coherence with philosophy, that is you can't demonstrate something as possible or impossible. It just doesn't work that way.
What's the difference between conceivability and possibility, and if you're using it that way?
Well, there's a lot of things that are possible that you can't conceive of just because there's too many variables. Like you can't conceive of a object that has a billion sides, but it's possible.
I don't think, I think conceivability isn't necessarily limited to what's easily imaginable in our brains in terms of like our intuitions. So I think that would still be covered by the concept of conceivable. So tell me if, is Amy using conceivable to mean, or sorry, possible to mean attaching some likelihood to it above zero, essentially?
Well, when we speak about possibility, you are saying this is a thing that can happen. We have demonstrated can a insect fly? Can any animal fly? Yes, this is a possibility. Can a being teleport through time? We don't know if that is a possibility. We don't know if that is able to work within a physical the physical constraints. So I guess you just have to have some way to know, is this thing possible or is this thing impossible?
That's where I disagree, because like in philosophy and logic, possibility just means that there's no contradiction. This is the definition of the word. It just means lack of contradiction.
So you're saying it could be possible for a being to travel through time, or maybe even have, like, just like someone flies, they could be born with the ability to go back and forth in time?
Yeah. So possible just means the thing can be true or false. So any sentence that could be true or false is possible, as long as no contradiction. But possibility doesn't mean that there is some chance it exists. That'd
be like probable.
Possibility.
Yeah,
sort of.
Yeah,
possibility just means this sentence could be true or false.
Yeah, and I recall what you mean, because in like modal logic or whatever, that's all we mean when we say a possible world. We don't mean that it has any probability attached to it. It's just some modal false, like true or false statement.
And I think that's what most theists mean when they ask, is God possible or whatever? They mean like, is there some % chance he exists or something? But really, that's not. Possibility is something much simpler, having a lower burden of any meaningful value just means there's no contradiction in it. And so when Dilettanti says something like you need to demonstrate something's possible, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. I think he means nomenologically possible, like given the laws of physics or something, but that's just not what possibility means in most philosophy.
When I say I want you to demonstrate that someone coming back from the dead 72 hours is possible, I would like to see examples of that. I think that is actually something we should be asking.
And I think it would be better to say probable, like what I think Ix was saying. That
yeah. So like the chain, I just clarified this as well, looking it up again. The chain goes from conceivable, like I could say, imagine a square circle, and you go, I don't think I can. I think there's something wrong with that. And I say, well, why is that? And you say, well, there seems to be a contradiction. So while you can say the words square circle, you might think it's conceivable, but it turns out not to be possible because of the contradiction problem. And we're not getting into any probability of actually existing. Like you'd have to be a Platonic realist of some kind to think there actually could be a geometric thing in existence. But you could say, is it conceivable? Yes, I could imagine it. Is it actually possible? No, it contains a contradiction, and you just end there.
Sure, I agree with that. I just think that was my example of having evidence for an impossibility.
Yeah.
Somebody in our audience would like to join us.
Inviting them up. Hello, Pi.
Hello.
Good morning, guys. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
No problem. I'm not a theist or anything like that. I just had a question regarding like kind of philosophy. Is that fine?
Oh, yes.
So a lot of like theist arguments, or some of the theists on the server, which I've argued with, often presents a argument about, I guess, like truth, and how if there is no God, then you can't have any type of like truth claims or any type of like that, or your worldview becomes like unintelligible. I'm
Precept.
not sure how to, yeah, kind of, and I'm not sure how to actually argue against that.
It's very stupid. So you say there's a universe with no God, and you exist in it, and you say I exist. Is that sentence true? Well, yes. So like if you think that you exist, then by definition you exist. Whether or not there's a God, that sentence would be true, right? Because the truth is, does this sentence correspond to reality? And so if there's no God and you say I exist and you do exist, then that sentence does correspond to reality, therefore it's true. So you can have truth just fine without God. You can have knowledge just fine without God. What you would need to ask them is, why do you need God to have knowledge? The question I like to ask is, what is your definition of knowledge that requires a God for it to exist? So like you have two universes, one with a God, one without a God. Both has a person in it, and the person thinks I exist or thinks 1 + 1 = 2 or something. And they need to have some definition of knowledge where the one with the God universe is true, so it counts as knowledge. But with the one with the not God universe, it's false. It doesn't count as knowledge. So even if the person is thinking 1 + 1 = 2, that's not knowledge in the non-God universe for some reason. And so they're going to have to give a definition of knowledge that has some set of criteria that eliminates that world. Like my definition of knowledge is justified true belief. So if you're in a universe without God and you think you exist, that's a belief. You're justified because if you're thinking it, then by definition you must exist, and it's true. Therefore, you have a justified true belief in its knowledge, and so it meets all of the 3 criteria of knowledge. Therefore, you have knowledge, and so they're going to have to add some extra criterion in there that says it's only knowledge if God something. Then you have to ask, well, why? Why is that relevant to knowledge? Knowledge is does our mental image correspond to reality? Why do you need this God something there? It seems kind of irrelevant.
I think I understand that. There's also like a secondary problem where it probably makes arguing that position a bit harder for me, is that I kind of fall into solipsism in a way, and so that's kind of
Why?
also a problem. Well, I'm not sure. I mean, to me, it's because I think solipsism is like the first thing you start with in a worldview, at least in my eyes.
I
And
agree.
everything past that is sort of like a kind of not necessarily an assumption, but just like axiomatic.
Well, axioms are the things you start with. So epistemic solipsism is the position that the first knowledge you start with is that you exist, which I agree with. But
Mm-hmm.
you can start with epistemic solipsism and then build off of it. So after you know you exist, you can say there's some difference between your imagination and your experience. Like when you think of a unicorn, you don't see the unicorn. So there's some difference between these two classes of things. And you can say, well, I want some method to differentiate of anything I see. Is it of the imaginary kind or is it of the experiential kind? And you can come up with a methodology like science, novel prediction, or whatever to differentiate these things. And you can say any hypothesis that can make predictions about the future is one that likely corresponds to the experiential things rather than the imaginary things. And then you can build models like materialism, external world things. This makes predictions. They get it right because they predict the future. And because they predict the future, they more likely correspond to reality than just a thing in your imagination. And so even though they aren't as certain as the fact that you exist, they're only probabilistically certain, you can still have a justification for believing them, even though it's not 100%. And you don't need 100% justification for something to be knowledge. It's called fallibilism. It's the consensus in science and philosophy. You don't need 100% certainty for knowledge. And so therefore, because you have a justification to believe there's an external world, which is this hypothesis that makes predictions that can differentiate between your imagination and your experience, you can then have knowledge there's an external world, even though it's only probabilistic, and escape solipsism.
said there's fallibilism.
Yes.
I never heard that.
Fallibilism.
Okay.
The consensus among scientists and philosophers. You don't need certainty for knowledge.
Yeah, that's probably always another of my problems. I didn't I thought you needed certainty for knowledge. I thought you could only make like belief claims if you didn't have 100% certainty.
Well, I mean, now all knowledge is a belief. So for something to be knowledge, it has to be a justified true belief. So knowledge claims are belief claims. It's a subset of belief. Like all roses are flowers. All knowledge is a belief, but it's a true justified belief.
You believe that you are going to make the bus, but it's a justified true belief when you are on that bus. Now you both believe it and you have knowledge.
Yeah. All right, I think that's all my questions I had.
Also, you're really quiet. You might want to turn your volume up for
Yeah,
next one.
it's just a microphone. I can't change it really, unless I gotta buy a new one.
Insert it into your mouth and then speak.
If you're on a computer, you can use software to
Oh.
increase the gain. The thing that TJump brought up at the beginning, I think, therefore I am, therefore I have at least one kind of knowledge, even in a universe that has arbitrarily other arrangements like no God in it, ties into the basic weakness of their argument, which is called the impossibility of the contrary. So what they want to do, if you go to religions.wiki or there's a couple others that have pages. The argument in general is called the transcendental argument for God. It's the original kind of root of precept. And you can find debates by TJump and many other people where they debate precepts. And one of the most common things that they will be challenged on is, can you prove the impossibility of the contrary? In other words, can you prove that no other worldview has knowledge? TJump just gave you an example of one contrary worldview that can be said to have knowledge. And so they're not going to be able to disprove that one. But you could do many different possible routes. There's also, I think, a route involving like a deceiving God that gives it a bit of trouble. There's a few different approaches, but I think TJump is the simplest.
Thank you for coming up, Pies. Do you have anything else you'd like to say? Cool. Have a good one. Thank you for coming up. God is Not Dead is up next. I invited you up.
Good morning, God is Not Dead. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Best movie ever, clearly.
Well, hi, how's it going, y'all?
Great. How are you?
Well, can't complain. I'm still alive.
Every day above ground's a good day.
What's on your mind?
Necessarily.
Well, nobody could actually prove God is real because you can only know God if it's through faith. Like only if you have faith in God, you can know God is real.
No, like God could prove he's real pretty easily. You say, I believe in God. If you're real, give me a gold brick. Gold brick appears in front of me. That's phenomenal evidence of God.
Well, you'll just be using God, which will go against what He wants you to believe in.
I
Like,
know
he
that your
does-
God is incompetent, but I don't care about that. You said it's impossible to prove God exists. That's false. It's very easy to prove God exists. He just has to get off his ass and do something. And so it's not impossible to prove God exists. It's only impossible to prove a God exists who's incompetent and has no evidence and doesn't do anything.
Well, no, because now you'll just be using God.
Doesn't make a difference.
If you want it just like that quick, you'll just be
No.
using God.
No, you can prove God exists. That was the claim. Can you prove God exists? The answer is yes. Yes, you can prove God exists if he gets off his butt. If he does not get off his butt, if he does nothing, has no evidence, and there's no difference between him and a magical leprechaun or Santa Claus, then obviously you can't prove God exists because there's no evidence of God. But if God did exist, it would be very easy to prove he exists. He'd just have to get off his butt.
There's many ways God could prove himself.
Well, because he doesn't want to show to you guys, non-believers, is one thing. But has been a lot of cases where humans have said, like, okay, yeah, God has helped me in this way. God has been there for me in this way. But to
So,
non-believers, because they have no faith, he will never do that.
so if that's the case, why should anybody care? Like, if God is really wants us to have faith, then he's going to have to do something to make it give us a compelling reason to have that faith. So far, I've not encountered anything that I find compelling for that. I'm not convinced. Are you sure you're not just taking other people's word for it and just going along with the excitement?
No, this is true. You only, I don't want you to have faith. If you have no faith, then you will never know God. It's
We don't
just
want to have
that
faith
simple.
either.
Well, that's okay. You know, you have the right to have your own opinion. God gives you that right.
Actually,
Why
You
is
just have
faith
that
in-
right.
that right, that
I would
right.
prefer God giving me a cure to cancer or something useful. But who cares what people say? Like, people say they see a God. People say they see leprechauns. People say they see Santa Claus. What people say isn't evidence. Revelation is not evidence. What you need for evidence is something that can differentiate people's imagination from reality. And revelation is just people's imagination. It's not evidence. And we know that because science doesn't use it because it's unreliable. It doesn't work. Never in the history of revelation has anyone with any revelation ever been able to predict the future and get it right about anything. What has been able to do that is science, novel testable prediction, verifiability, falsifiability. Those things can predict the future and get it right. Revelation cannot.
Yeah, the idea that our right to an opinion comes from God, I reject that because for myself, like I'm looking at, we had the Magna Carta to begin with, and we have United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. U.S. and Canada, we have constitutional rights for various for holding for expressing ourselves, and we're expressing our opinions when we express ourselves very often. Here in Canada, we explicitly have under Section 2 of our Charter from our Constitution, the right to have an opinion, and there's no restriction on what those opinions are. I don't see this coming from God. Before you can establish that these rights come from God, the prerequisite is you need to establish that there actually is such a God.
Well, there's been cases of scientists who have said that God has actually, through one of their, what do they call it? Through one of their like cases, I guess, or investigations about science, that there was no way that one object could have been there if someone hasn't moved it. So they have actually proved that God is real, but the government doesn't want to let that out.
No. So that's false. In physics, objects in motion remain in motion until acted upon by opposite force. So it's not the case that objects in motions need something to create the motion. That's false. All of physics proves that's false. That's just the first three laws of thermodynamics prove that's false. So if you think a scientist disproved all of the laws of physics in a paper, that's going to be a surprise to pretty much all scientists everywhere in the world because it hasn't happened.
That's a different type of scientists.
No, it's not. It's the
The
same
ones
thing.
I'm talking. All right, what I'm talking about is because I have seen it on video, and there's a scientist, and he said he was a scientist. That okay, that there was no way that that object could have been there if someone hadn't put it there, or something hadn't put it there, on his investigation.
What object was he referring to?
I don't know.
It sounds like you don't really know what you think you
'Cause-
saw.
No, it's because it was a long time ago. I need to look back
Okay.
to my history.
Generally
and all that.
speaking, if someone says they are a scientist or do the science, it's not sufficient for them to like wear a white lab coat or just like put their name on the screen. They have to publish. And the idea of publishing in science means that there's a peer reviewable document in an agreed upon format which explains the methodology, etc., and allows for what's called reproducibility. In other words, someone can follow the instructions in the paper and can do the same kind of experiment themselves and try to get the same results. If it's some kind of reproducible experimental finding, then other scientists can check it out. That's why we call that science. But a person just says they're a scientist who went to school, who has a degree, isn't a scientist per se until they actually do something like that. That's the scientific method. So you have to.
JJ in the chat says that's the appeal to some guy argument.
Yeah, you gotta present the evidence, or
That's
at least
a
know what
good
it's called.
name for that argument.
It is.
It's not
Okay.
even appealed authority. You're right.
The government is hiding both aliens and God.
This dude said a thing, and it's true because he said this thing.
Oh, if you go to the CIA's website, you could and look up. They actually have I forgot. Hold up. I think it's the Adam and Eve story, and
The CIA is hiding the Adam and Eve story?
no, they're not hiding it. You could actually Google it up. Like you could go to their website and search it up. They'll have it, because it's they actually talk about stuff like that. But they're not
CIA
hiding
does
God.
not.
You're saying
They're
the
not, they're
CIA
not
reading
hiding.
room?
They're not hiding it. It's just that people don't believe in it. So of course they're gonna laugh at people.
Right, because Adam and Eve was disproven by biology many years ago. Like we know Adam and Eve is false, 100% false.
So I just typed in Adam and Eve on the CIA reading room. CIA.gov. I'm going to link this in chat.
Oh my god, it does go to aliens. Yes, I win.
I haven't actually looked into any of this, but it does have a link to the Adam and Eve story on there. So maybe he read that and thinks it's true because the government said something. Is that what's going on?
No, just read it.
Here, is this? I linked it in chat. I'm pinging you. Is this what you're talking about?
The nuke fluke. Great Britain, we're on our way. Like I don't think this has anything to do with actual Adam and Eve.
Is that what you're talking about? Is that the link you saw?
Adam and Eve story by Chan Thomas.
I found a few different ones, and the third one starts with, in May 1943, Adam and Eve only resembled what their descendants would become. Huge gray machines standing 7 feet high, 10 feet long, and 2 feet wide.
So good.
This is not evidence or historical document. I also find CIA documents of pretty much anything because they're just anything that happened or was written by anybody in the White House while they were in a position of national security. And so they classify all kinds of documents that have nothing to do with reality, that are all crap. There's lots of them.
There's literally classified handwritten notes between people just saying like totally random stuff on there. It's like handwritten notes that they found and uploaded.
And
those are
you guys
legit.
bring
Those are like actual
676 Mike up real quick?
What?
Can you guys bring up 676 Mike?
Eventually we'll get to him.
Yeah, we normally don't bring on a number of people at once. There's it's just kind of one guest at a time. It sounds like
that could be fun though, Randolph. We always have the ability to remove one from stage, right?
Yeah, God is not dead. I guess there's two things. One is I want to know why you'd want to bring them up before we do that. And the other thing is, it sounds like you've been delving into conspiracy theories, and there's a whole community of conspiracy theorists who, the way I like to phrase it is, like, I find that many of them are very skilled at the critical thinking aspect. The problem is that they don't seem to have the wisdom to know when to stop, when enough is enough, and they go way too far. So that's not all of them, but that's many of them. And I wonder if the people you're listening to might be concocting a very complicated story. What's missing from a lot of those conspiracy theorists' ideas is Occam's razor.
No, well, my only thing is I wanted to say is if you do not have faith, you will not believe in God. Since I could, any of you right now do not have faith, that's why you guys do not believe in
Faith
God.
is just pretending
pretty-
to know things you don't actually
Exactly.
know.
See, there you go.
But
So only through faith can you know that God is real.
but God is not
Now,
dead.
could you guys bring up 676 Mike, because I think he'll have more evidence.
Just quickly say, it's true that I don't have faith in a God, but faith in general is a different thing. I have faith in my kids' ability to be successful on sports day at school. That can become proven or unproven by the end of sports day, but it's still an attitude thing. So, faith is not the requirement you're going to find in the skepticism circles. You're going to find people are going to want hard evidence for things before they're going to accept them as a part of reality.
And I would even just say we have hope, we have confidence, we have these sorts of words, but we view faith negatively. And so by saying you don't have faith, so you don't believe in God, we will agree with you. But why should we have faith?
It's not why, it's only the person if they want to or not. So it's not why, it's all you. Do you or do you not? Simple as that.
But we view faith as bad. So it's like saying, do you want to have cancer? You got to want to have it. We're like, no, you don't. But you're like, why do you want faith? Why should we have this characteristic when we view faith as kind of a long form of ignorance?
Well, you see, you know how you guys keep saying, oh, he just needs to get off his ass and do something. Well, no, because in that case, then everybody would be a believer. It's he wants you to believe in God.
Is that what he wants?
Yes, but not because he will be giving you guys stuff and giving you guys stuff. Like you have to be able to believe in God and have faith that he's there in order to be like to see or in order, I don't know how to explain it. Like
See, but from what you're telling us, you're saying we have to believe on bad evidence. To actually believe on good evidence is actually worse.
Yeah, to me, it sounds like you're making up an excuse because your God's too lazy to do anything. Since he doesn't provide evidence, we have to make up an excuse to say, well, the reason he doesn't do anything is because, well, he just doesn't want to like give us gifts because then it'd be too obvious. So I have to make up an excuse so that it isn't too obvious that he's not doing anything.
When people are telling others that they need to have faith, they're setting up a foundation for a bias. This is how it looks to me.
And the bias in this question, God is dead, you might want to look up agency attribution. Do you know what cognitive biases are? God is not dead?
I do not.
Okay. So when we study things like optical illusions, you can go to like a museum or someplace where you can experience something that really looks one way, but then it's just deceiving you. Like it looks like it's going away from you, but it's actually coming towards you. It looks really big, but it's really small. The brain and the eye can be deceived. You're familiar with that phenomena, right?
Yes.
Okay. So cognitive biases are like optical illusions, but for your thought process itself. And we're all susceptible to them to various degrees in various ways because our brains don't work perfectly. And one of the most common cognitive biases is agency attribution, which is basically assuming that if anything happens, it must be happening for a reason, and it must be the intentional caused action of some agent, some being who wants that to happen. So when people get something really bad happening to them, sometimes they'll say, why is this happening to me? Who is punishing me? And they might think that is God. Or when something good is happening to them, they might say, oh, this is really amazing. It must be God. Or someone must like me. These are just common ways that people think, even from like being infants. And
God is good, right?
Right. So is that kind of the way you're thinking when you say that people say that God helped them, or they claim that, does that sound like agency attribution bias to you?
No. Well, from what I'm trying to say is, of course, bad things are gonna happen. Was it God? No. But it's only like he will only give you strength in a way, like you have anger, you'll get angry, you'll go through all these process, but that's only to like help you build up that cause not energy, that strength that you need to keep living and keep fighting for life and stuff that happens in life. So it builds, like, I guess, character. Like when people fight, of course they're gonna be humble after they finish fighting, because they learn through that experience.
I didn't hear anything about the idea that God is or isn't helping people.
Yeah, I think what's being described is a coping mechanism, and there are different ways that people can cope with things. It's not uncommon, I find, for a lot of religious people to think that the only solution to coping with any adversity in life is to put trust in their god or goddess or whatever. But the reality is there are many different ways that we can cope with things in life, and religion isn't the only answer. And religion works for some people, and it doesn't work for others, just like other coping arrangements may or may not work for people. It's going to be different from one person to the next.
And I misspoke on the name of it. It's more commonly referred to as agent detection illusion or agent detection bias. I'll post it in the chat, and I will DM it to you, God is Not Dead. You could take a look at this and ask yourself if this is what's going on when you think that something is God's doing. You would make that assumption. You're doing something humans have been doing for thousands, maybe millions of years. When they see lightning, they've created stories about it, like Thor. When they see scary waves, they make stories about it, like Neptune. And we've always interpreted phenomena to have some agent behind it until we understood what the actual phenomena was caused by, and until we got a pattern of enough successful understandings of phenomena that we stopped assuming all phenomena are caused by agents.
Did that make sense to you? God is not dead?
Little, yeah.
So I encourage people to doubt and strive to be better at skepticism and critical thinking. I take doubt as my ally. What are your thoughts on doubting these ideas about God that you have?
What do you mean?
Do you think that your God would be strong enough to withstand any doubt and scrutiny that you apply to the idea of what you understand your God to be?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm not God.
I suggest perhaps think about that, and feel free to come back on another episode with us and let us know what your thoughts are on all of that. And I would suggest research skepticism, research critical thinking, research doubt, those kinds of things, and try to look at it from the perspective of a third person. How could you doubt these things, and how could you question them, and what kinds of answers would not only you have, but others might have if they were to ask the same questions?
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming
Thanks
up.
for joining us.
Those were great. That was a great conversation. 676 Mike, I don't see your hand up anymore.
Taco, the person who is trying to get in earlier, they with their cell phone issues indicated in the live text chat that they've got it resolved and they're ready to be moved up. I tagged you in the in my response to them.
I invited them up.
If faith is just
Legend?
not a good way to come to a conclusion because you can use it for any deity. So just if you're saying I go through faith to find my Christianity, but someone else can find it in Islam, try to find out what that other thing is. Is it evidence?
So Legend is not coming up. I think his thing still broke. So I'll invite the next person in queue, TheSnowyBanana.
Yeah, that's been a problem that people haven't been able to join via phone.
Let
And-
me. I just reset the request. Maybe that'll help. I don't know.
Yeah, I've been having the same problem every Sunday.
Is that where
Hello,
the hand
hello, the Snowy Banana. Welcome.
Howdy, thank you.
I like your
what?
name.
Thanks. So it's called "Convince Us God or Gods Exist." So, do y'all have a particular definition or list of characteristics for a god, or is that okay if I use my own?
Oh, we very
Tell us
much
what it is.
prefer if people present an idea to us that is their own, because there are so many different goddesses and gods that people believe in.
Okay.
So, yeah, that would be fantastic. We'd happily give you a minute or two to lay it out. I think IX was about to say something, so maybe I'll just let him shoot it.
I just said, tell us what it is.
Okay,
I
I'll get.
do want to jump in and say there are some minimum criteria here. Is like a mind that does something, like controlling the universe, creating all things. Usually,
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
So not just like nature or a potato or
Yeah, no, that's
X's
fine.
hair. Not
Yeah, no,
sufficient.
No,
Even if
being
they're
a mind.
fried?
Being a mind is part of the definition, absolutely. So then I guess the second part is what about existence? Do you have a particular definition or set of criteria for whether or not something exists?
As properties in reality.
As properties in reality. Okay, and then how would you identify, does this thing exist?
Well, identification is irrelevant. Epistemology and how we would know it exists is separate than does it exist. So evidence of any kind, anything that can differentiate imagination from reality. Novel testable predictions are a great example. Science is great.
Well, it
Evolution is
just
not.
says convince us gods exist. So I mean, if I posit something and I could just say, okay, well, this thing exists, but there's no way to know whether or not it exists, then that's not going to be very convincing, right?
Right.
So that's what I'm saying. It's what, how would y'all?
Evidence, anything that can differentiate imagination from reality. Novel testable prediction, science. Those are good answers.
Okay. I mean, do you think so? I would assume. Actually, I know for you, TJump, that you definitely think so. That you yourself exist. And I assume Randolph Richardson thinks that Randolph Richardson exists. I assume Amy Newman thinks.
I will say that I'm pretty sure TJump exists. I do have some doubts about myself, though.
Oh, really? Okay, that's interesting. Swaps it on its head, but that I assume you would also all think that your minds, right, as well.
Synonymous with the self.
Right. Okay. So you would, okay. So you would say that you are a mind. So then, if you exist in your mind, do you also think that you're able to do things within reality as well?
Well, just a sec. Being, and I say yes as well to that question, but I see the mind as a manifestation of the physical being that I am. The brain and all my bodily functions make it possible for me to have a mind.
What do you mean by that exactly?
The mind is part of who I am. It's not some independent thing. My mind would not exist without the rest of me, my physical body. That's how I see it. I could be wrong, but it makes sense to me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. Well, so then by that, with that criteria of the minimum criteria for what y'all want a god to be, and then what y'all mean by exist, and y'all's personal beliefs about existence, I can define God as just any mind that exists, and then by using that definition, boom, you're all gods, and you all.
Goodbye. All right, Peepo Clown, you're next in queue.
Oh, that the Snowy Banana no longer exists. Oh, what happened? He peeled out of here, did he?
He mic dropped.
People
I think
on
I think he
mobile.
got booted. I think he got booted by Taco.
Yeah, I think so too.
Oh yeah. We're not doing that. We've done that like 8 times now over the last year. Like, Ape, you're next in queue. What's going on?
Hello, ApeGod. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
What's up? So just thought of having like a brief, interesting conversation about some doubts which I had. I'm an atheist, by the way, but I just saw a bunch of these live streams that you were doing, TJump. So I sort of noticed, like, I think you guys need to be more aggressive at the muting part, where when you debate with these guys that actually debate on the behalf of Islam, they usually talk about interpretations. I've tried to debate a bunch of them, but every single time they come up with, like, interpretations. They ask you if you know Arabic, and then they talk over. I think you need to mute them more aggressively until they answer the question. What do you think about that suggestion?
Right. A suggestion I would offer all atheists that debate with Muslims is just read a few surahs of the Quran, because it's just as cuckoo as the Bible, and once you dig into them, I find they often don't want to defend any of them.
I think it depends on the situation.
Yeah, sure.
So like muting people can be useful in some cases, but detrimental in other cases. And so, like, especially if you're trying to eat up time, letting them talk as much as possible is usually a good thing, because then they take up as much of the time as possible. And so muting them would only be beneficial if it can help move the point forward or redirect the points back to the question being at hand. But Muslims, they don't listen. They're not going to change their topic because you muted them. They're just going to re-ask the same thing. So it's usually better to let them talk and then call them stupid and then explain why they're stupid to try and change the topic, because then they're going to get focused on that you're calling them stupid, so they're going to lose their points. So then you can move on to a different point. That's usually better than muting them.
And because the other day I saw one guy was like debating with you guys, and then I saw that the moment I think there was like another Arabic guy that actually said what the meaning of the Arabic words were, and this guy was like countering that by saying calling him a liar.
Yeah.
Is that a cop out? So silly.
Definitely. What's
So
the
telling
Muslim guy's name that we used to have on here?
Mobarak.
Mobarak.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
So one of the problems with telling people they should read the whatever religious scripture in some other language, usually it's the claim to be the original language, is that would put accepting that would be putting somebody at an unfair disadvantage, unless they actually were fluent in that language. And see, we're here speaking English, and when people come to join us and they're going to quote religious scripture, it's a reasonable expectation by not only us but also the audience members that the citations are going to be referring to English translations or English versions of whatever the scripture is. So it's for the linguists, it makes sense to debate this kind of stuff, I suppose. But
can I point out something real quick?
Yes, please.
Sure.
So they're just being super dishonest with you with what you're talking about, right? So like when they say, do you speak Arabic? And you can't understand the meaning of what it's saying because it's Arabic. So they might say like, I don't know, give me like a 3-word phrase that would mean like one coherent thing, or like a 2-word phrase. Or
Thus he spoke.
Yeah. And so that might be like 1 word in Arabic.
Okay.
And so because it's like 1 word in that has that meaning, instead of like 3 words that provide that meaning, they say it means something different, which is really dishonest.
The problem here is like they don't make like a prediction in advance that accurately matches like future discoveries, but rather after we have the discoveries, they try to post hoc rationalize, and then that's where the problem is, right? They try to adapt the interpretation to match any future discovery. So that's almost like horoscopes. Makes no sense.
This isn't us versus them, though. I have talked with like honest Muslims, and I just want to say in front of everybody, this is not us versus them, right?
ApeGod, it sounded like you were referring to the moving the goalposts tactic. Go ahead, Amy.
Exactly.
Well, you should talk to them about post-diction and prediction. It's not impressive for someone to be able to go into the past and say, did you know I predicted this? No, what is impressive is if you make a prediction. If you are able to actually foresee an event, say this meteor is going to have a shower right here, and then it happens, you are making a prediction in the future.
Yep. And I think the one other question that I would also want to ask is like the debate that I really want to watch is actually TJump versus Mohammad Hijab, because I feel he's actually afraid of like debating.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Like he knows he doesn't know much about science and philosophy, and so if he's brought up against anybody who does know about science and philosophy, he gets very defensive very quickly. So he only, one of the common things of most Muslim debaters, especially on YouTube, is they only talk to people who are unqualified and who don't know what they're talking about. They never let up anybody. Like I was just on the, like, I think it was the Muslim Lantern, who I went on his live stream show, and he wouldn't let me up because he knew I knew more about philosophy than him. He's like, nope, we're only going to let in people who don't know what they're talking about, who are just average Joes. So I think that's a criticism of Muslim apologists, that they only let up average people, never talk to any experts in the field, because then they look stupid and everyone knows it.
Because the point with Mohammad Hijab is he just pretends to be smart by using word salad. Because if you take the example of his other friend, Hamza Tazortis, that guy, like I've seen his debate versus Lawrence Krauss. Lawrence Krauss really makes very good points, but the problem is he resorts to like insulting tactics, or like, you know, using the support of his audience in order to make Lawrence Krauss look dumb. But Lawrence Krauss made pretty good points. But I think if you handle them, it's much better.
Right. So I think actually the Hamza Sorties versus Lawrence Krauss debate is why Hamza Sorties stopped debating. He actually stopped debating because he was so embarrassed by how badly he got owned by Lawrence Krauss in that debate.
Yeah, Lawrence Krauss did a pretty good job. Although I think Hamza did still use like some cheap tactics in order to, like, you know, make a problem for Lawrence Krauss.
Also, ApeGod, this is just my feelings, but that scientist and theologist, they come in with different goals when they are trying to debate. The scientists and the people who are science-minded are trying to convey information, so they're trying to use as simple lay language as possible. The creationists, Dawaists, the theologically minded want to sound technical, and that is a completely different goal, because you are going to use a lot of technical jargon with, like TJump was saying, with a lay audience that doesn't know anything, and sound like you're actually saying that the Quran is making confident arguments. A very specific surah I think that you should look up is called the
Correct.
I
And
love
the other one thing that I wanted to ask you guys is also, like, let's say you guys are debating a Muslim person. I think the better tactic to debate them would be like you take a verse from the Quran and ask them to tell exactly what it means first, and after they say what it means and give all the possible interpretations, and then you refute them after the fact. Because if you tell the contradiction first, then they will try to adapt to whatever they think is right. But if you ask them to tell exactly what that means in the first place and then tell them what is wrong with that, then they don't get an opportunity to make any changes. Like, for example, Quran 21:30 that talks about living things being made out of water. That sentence is literally false, right? Because living things are made out of cells, and cells are the lowest common denominator of life. But if you want to go even further, water is not fundamental, like it is particles, right? Particles are fundamental. So that sentence is literally false. And I think I've even I don't know if somebody just replied to me. I don't know.
What would you suggest for dealing with the Quran chapter 4 verse 89 that talks about killing people who don't immigrate in the way of Allah? That sounds to me like it's telling Muslims that it's okay to kill infidels, kill people who don't believe in Allah. That includes atheists, that includes people from other religions that are not Islam. And I've gone with this a number of times, and they'll often have all kinds of excuses. But I mean, like, what do you think would be a good response to
I don't have a very good response when it comes to like things related to morality, because I'm always confused about subjective and objective morality. But I would rather tell you guys to just debate things that are based on scientific facts, like for example, a fact of something that exists, like the moon, or when it talks about like water, living things being made out of water, those kind of things. Because then they can't go into this objective and subjective and say that it's okay for God, but it's not okay for us. That kind of nonsense.
I think that's a good point, that arguing something like definitions in a holy book, because of the natural ambiguity of language, they can always just change what the word means or their interpretation to make it fit, just like the Christians do. But the Muslim
Correct.
debaters are even worse at it than the Christians.
Yeah,
They
they're
just
the
do it
worst.
whenever it fits.
Yep. And one more thing that I've also done is like, if you want, I can send you this whole document that I created with all the different definitions. So even if they say that there are different words, when it comes to like the Big Bang, there in Quran 21:30 talks about how the earth and heaven were once joined and then it split. But all parts of the scientific literature only talks about expansion. So there is no such thing as split, right? Like split and expand are completely two different definitions. And in Arabic itself, they have two different Arabic words to describe each of them, right? So if Arabic itself has different words to describe and label each, then you can actually use that as a counter argument. So you can say, ask them like, why doesn't Quran just mention the right word even for the English translation? Makes no sense.
Because they're reading into it. They're going post hoc afterwards and saying, this is what it says.
Correct. And I think the last point that I would like to make is this is an idea that I've been thinking of through my own philosophy. It may or may not be correct. But this is something to do with logical contradictions, like when we talk about things like square circle. And I can give you a very good example on how these kind of things may be possible. And what I've realized is that when it comes to like making logical rules and like understanding about reality and using language to describe reality, what I really see is that whatever we create using language is dependent or corresponds to reality. That's how we confirm things as valid. So if that is the case, then I also see that in some point in time, if there could be a scientific law, for example, maybe there is a small chance that some physical properties of the universe could randomly change the next day, and we may have to make adaptations to that scientific law to accommodate for those new differences, which is the reason why science does not make claims of absolute certainty. So when it comes to logical contradictions, the one example that I can give you on how it's possible, it does not just correspond to reality, but I also think it depends on the observer. For example, when I enter a dream, there is something that is logically contradictory to the real world that I experience, in which in a dream I experience two of my friends talking to me. But somehow there is a logical contradiction that I observe in my dream where two different friends who have two different faces also appear to have the same face at the same time. And somehow I can also experience my own consciousness inside of them as well. So it's like they are separate individuals and same individuals at the same time. So if dreams are able to simulate such an experience, then it might be possible that, let's say, there is a different possible world or a different parallel universe in which the entity or the observer has a different kind of different dimension of perception. It may be possible that a square can also appear to be a circle at the same time, and it might make sense to them. What do you think about that?
So I think one point of refinement, you said some of the natural laws will change and science has to be updated. I think it's important to also emphasize the possibility that we just figured out that we were observing it in a certain way that wasn't a complete picture or was inaccurate somehow, and we update science in that part. This is a minor refinement is all I'm suggesting here.
Yeah, that's
So I wanted to talk about the round square part for a little bit. So in philosophy, they specifically say it can't be both round and a square in the same sense at the same time. Because obviously, if you look at it from two different perspectives, you can have an object that looks round from one perspective and looks like a square from a different perspective or whatever, or is a square in one dimension but is in a circle in a different dimension. But that doesn't matter to the round square argument. The round square argument is specifically that it can't be both round and both a square in the same sense at the same time. And so if you're saying it's round in one aspect and square in a different aspect, that's not relevant to the argument. So another one is like something can't be 100% red and 100% green at the same time. Looking at it from two different perspectives, or people who have different eyesights can see different colors, none of that matters. It's specifically talking about the quality of the object in the same sense being two completely opposite things in their entirety, not partially both, or both from a different perspective, or both in a different universe. That doesn't matter. The problem in philosophy is specifically that they are two contradictory properties in the same sense at the same time.
Yep. So my point to that is basically like I think what you're actually saying is correct, but I think my idea behind this is like it may just be the case that it is within this universe, in the sense like it can't be contradictory at the same time. But the point is, what if there is another universe in which it makes sense to the observer that a thing can be square and circle at the same time, and at the same time, when they invent instruments to measure these things, the instruments will also result in readings that appear to be the same way. So in their universe, it makes sense to them even with the external verification tools. It's just an idea. It may or may not be possible.
It's called paraconsistent logic. So paraconsistent logic is a logic that if a universe was like that, if it operated under paraconsistent logic, then you could have both round squares at the same time.
Okay, I didn't know that was a thing. That's why I was just curious, like, what do you guys think of that?
I think it's wrong. I think it's silly, but it's...
We have one comment from our YouTube audience from Broadhigh saying the language needs to be built upon the logic.
Yeah, that's correct.
Not necessarily, no. Because there are many different forms of logic. There's many-valued logic, there's fuzzy logic, there's diletheistic logic, there's paraconsistent logic, there's standard logic, and our typical English language is built on standard logic. So our language can be built on standard logic, while any of those other logics could be true, we just don't know it yet. And so the language doesn't need to be built on the logic. It's not required to do that. In the case that these other logics are actually what govern the universe, and our logic is built on a different logic, it should be the case that you would probably want to build the language on the logic that governs the universe, I guess, but it's not required.
Yeah, I think that is still the right way to do it, right? Like we make observations and then build language and logic based on those observations. So yeah, anyways, it was nice talking to you guys. I just had these few questions, and we'll catch up with you guys later.
I appreciate your tips and suggestions. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for coming up.
Sure.
If anybody would like to come up, 676 Mike, we've got an open stage right now. Go ahead and raise your hand.
In the meantime, I'll just say I agree with something Ape said about asking someone to clarify their definitions or interpretations of any kind of religious text. I have found in the times where I've done that, it's worked better. For instance, if we're talking about the idea that the Quran says that it came from the angel Gabriel, and if we're going to compare passages and ask if those passages are similar to other passages from other texts and so on, at the very minimum, it works better if you ask them to describe what they think the passage means rather than just giving your own reading of it. Because they'll probably give you you don't speak Arabic, you just don't understand, even if they just changed what they think it means to suit trying to get out of your argument.
And that's a nonsense argument.
Yeah, but it's a very good point that Ape made. Always ask people to give what their interpretation of it is before presenting your own.
I just want to piggyback off that, because they do like to say, first of all, you can't say that it came from God. If you ever say they have, absolutely, it had to have been delivered by an angel, but actually it was written by Zayd ibn Thabit, who was Muhammad's #1 scribe while he was alive. And so just pointing that out there, as well as the passage that I love to go over with them is the ant, because they generally just assume that we're not going to get into, they don't like to get into the same Bible battles that we seem to get with Christians, but the Dawahists like to stay in some sort of deistic kalam contingency arguments. Come on, Muslims. Come on here and defend ants. Talking ants, specifically, like a Pixar movie.
Oh yeah.
That's what they asked us to prove last week that I thought was hilarious. That's right.
There's also a prophecy about a man being able to talk to his shoes. And I had a Muslim tell me that there's some electronic gimmick shoe somewhere that like makes noises or something. And he said that you can talk to your shoe, so it's a fulfillment of the prophecy.
Yeah, that was on this show too a while ago.
Yeah.
It all makes sense. Even in the chapter where he does the miracle of the cracking of the earth, it's a single line. The rest of that chapter is him basically telling non-believers to go off because they don't believe him. They're like, Muhammad, you didn't do that. No one believes you. And that is basically the rest of the chapter. He's like, but you're all going to fry in hell. The end. The miracle.
Oh, it's gone from burning to frying now. Wow. They've progressed. They've got frying pans now.
Islam is interesting in the hell because it's the expansion pack. You have to like go into more detail. So they have like multiple layers of hell. All sorts of fun for the guy who loves us.
That's a funny way of showing love.
So TheSnowyBanana wants to come back up. I guess we can give him another shot if they'll
Sure.
have an honest conversation.
Let's do that. I thought we were making some interesting progress there, but hello again, TheSnowyBanana.
Okay, I know that I was being a little trolly. I want to apologize for that, okay? Basically, just the whole gist of what I was getting at is just I think that the question is a little bit iffy. I'm not entirely sure that it's like the best worded. That's all I was basically going to say.
The question, does a God exist?
Yeah, like convince us that a God exists, and then what is a God? What is existence? Because like eventually, and I was talking with TJump in his chat about this. It's basically like depending on how like what you're setting forth as requirements to prove that a God exists, like you could end up in very strange places. And TJump told me that Taco would get mad if I brought this up, but like a solipsist could for instance say that they're a god, and like, oh well, based off of what y'all define as like what's good evidence for existence, then I could just say that I'm a god and I exist, therefore God exists, and it would just it gets silly at that point. That's basically all I was saying. So it's like just whatever your criteria for what a god is that's all. Just I would say it has to include something that's maybe separate from your own personal self or something like that.
Sure, but I would also assert that we are creators. In fact, the only creators that we know of are the ones on this planet right now. And so I, at least, am against any notion that there is a creator of the universe because natural laws do not come from minds. At least that's where no evidence currently lies.
And the idea that God speaks things into existence isn't original to Abrahamism. It came from other religions that preceded it, like Ptah in Egyptian mythology, speaks things into existence.
Well, I'm not specifically championing Abrahamic religion by
I'm just giving like an example. The whole idea that a person, Amy brought up, the creating things just by having a mind and causing them to exist or whatever. The way the creator is supposed to be able to in most creation myths. It's not like an original concept. Like there were other religions that preceded the ones people usually like to argue that kind of give a genealogical account of how that idea developed. And that's true. I think most of the properties that people attribute to gods, whatever their definition of a god is, have a long history amongst many different religions of developing and influencing one another to become the sort of combination that any given religion ends up being. And if you want to go back, you can usually explain how those so-called God properties came to be believed in and told as stories in a way that's more satisfying and probable than the argument the person is putting forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to agree. My whole point is not necessarily like trying to prove that a God exists or anything like that. But mainly, I'm just the question itself, and then like how do you? I guess if I were to have to like challenge y'all on something, would be like how do you disprove solipsism? Because TJump had an argument for it and he presented it to me, but I mean I don't necessarily know that that's going to disprove. No, shaking your head, no.
I think he's making his hair wiggle.
Yeah, there you go. That's what he's trying to do. Okay, I see. But yeah, it's like, how do you disprove solipsism? And like, if a solipsist were to say like, "Oh, I am God. I made everything come into being," then how do you argue against that?
Here's my problem with solipsism is that although I guess there is no 100% certainty, minds and thus this type is fairly new. It's only a few billion years old. And so for billions of years on this planet, there were no minds. Possibly for good majority of the universe's history, there were no minds. And so if that is true, then we are not in a solipsistic world because, there's no one mind everywhere doing everything. I mean, if that is true, then there actually isn't, I guess, 2 billion years and then 13.8, or I don't even know what that would mean.
Well,
that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense to me. What I would say is, if I were to argue from a solipsistic perspective, is that I could always just say that there's a difference between the unconscious mind and the conscious mind, and the unconscious mind is the one that's responsible for putting forth all of the laws of nature, or what appears to be like laws of nature in the universe and all that.
I get what you're saying, but we already have a use of an unconscious mind and a conscious mind. I'll tell you how our brain delineates it real easily. So we have certain things where we have to use our conscience. If you want to go up and get a toothbrush or whatever, you need to walk over to it. But if you perhaps have to have your heartbeat, your mind is doing that. However, you have little control. You maybe can do things to speed up your heart, but you don't actively control your heartbeat. However, there are actual things in between. We can look at things like our breath, like breathing. Naturally, we just breathe. However, in certain cases, I think probably from hiding evolutionarily, we need to be able to hold our breath, and maybe from swimming. And so there seems to be this kind of spectrum of conscious and unconscious, and none of it seems to be fundamental to the universe. It seems to be just this thing that happened after billions of years of evolution, just small things becoming complexer over time. And then we didn't need to photosynthesize. We didn't need to spew our guts like a fungi, but here we are. We get to walk on plains.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I would agree. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm going to agree. I'm just wondering what the argument against solipsism
this is my thing, because for solipsism to exist, for us to be everything, all minds, it would just be a weird thing for evolution. Are we also all of the animals? Are all the flowers? Are we all the not minds also? Are we all like the rocks?
That's what I mean. I think a solipsist would say yes, or not necessarily that you are all those things, but that those things are all you, or or not necessarily you, but like a part of you. They stem from the unconscious. Is what it's what I would imagine a solipsist would say.
See, and I think if we knocked out all minds, the rocks would still exist. I think we give too much credit to minds.
Right. Well, so I think like a solipsist would say that, like, while yes, like you and I could even exist like somewhat separately from each other as conscious minds, but then there's a difference between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. They could argue that there's an unconscious mind, and that's like this great thing, and then all these conscious minds, these more individualized things that are becoming aware of things going on, are separate from
you. It's still in the back somewhere. Like, I don't know of any unconscious that would connect us together.
Right, and so then I guess it just comes down to like what a solipsist is classifying as like the unconscious mind, and like I guess what a mind even is. Because I mean, doesn't this come down at this point? I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm misusing this, but like the law of identity or something like that, where it's like, how do we, or what is it, like Loki's wager type stuff? It's like, where do you begin and where do you end? And it's like a solipsist is just going to say, oh, well, everything's a part of me. And then you're going to say, well, no. Like, I might not be able to delineate exactly where I end, but no, I'm separate from all these other things. And so then it just comes down to that.
The universe. We can say that we are the conscious part of the universe, but we are individual organisms that are separated out. The things that we think are unique and amazing about our very specific animal brains, I think we sometimes anthropomorphize, or in certain things, I'm not saying, but in like pantheism, it gets even fuzzier. It just becomes this nebulous thing where just everything's a mind. And if I have a mind, but then the rock has a mind, it's like, what is a mind then at that point? Because I think, although we say we know nothing about minds or consciousness, I think we do have at least a good footing on what it is. And I think there's a reason that we can go brush our teeth and the rock would not only not be able to do it, but I also think the rock existed before there were beings that could pick up the toothbrush.
Right. Well, I mean, again, so then I think they would just say that the rock you very obviously have a conscious mind, and the rock very obviously does not have a conscious mind. But then that both entities would belong to that greater unconscious mind, is what a solipsist would say. And then you could say, well, no, that I don't agree with that. But then, I mean, I guess the next question would be, if you would agree that there's a difference in between a conscious mind and a conscious mind, is like, how do you identify a mind that's unconscious?
Oh, I can tell you, because I don't bring this up every podcast, but every once in a while, I do have epilepsy. And so I very specifically, biologically, can tell you that there is a function between having conscience and not having conscience, and you just wake up somewhere. And so we know when people, I actually would say consciousness is a spectrum. You could be both conscious on one side, unconscious on the other, and then I would say you can be like a multitude, almost in between. How much coffee have you had? How sleepy are you? But we definitely know when someone is conscious, when they're walking around, when you're asking them, hey, like I had to answer certain questions when I came back, do you know what year it is? Do you know who's president? And people who are just completely unconscious.
Well, right. So then but that just sounds like identifying somebody who is conscious, and then
unconscious.
Right, and then I guess like when they're not conscious, you could say like, okay, well, that's an unconscious mind, because we can see them becoming conscious, becoming unconscious, becoming conscious. So we know that that's an unconscious mind when a conscious mind stops being conscious, but we have good reason to suspect that they're going to come back to being conscious. But let's say that there's an unconscious mind and it's never been conscious, and we don't actually know that it's going to become conscious, but would we still call that a mind? Like, I mean, I guess like somebody in like in a coma, but they've been in a coma ever since they were born. Like, would we call that a mind still, or would we say that's something else?
I mean, because I would say classically, you understand when someone is in a coma, they are unconscious. I don't know what it means because I view very layly the mind kind of like the operating system of the physical hardware of the brain. What does it mean to, I guess, have never run the operating system, I guess, but it's running other things unless machines are running it for. So if their brain is able to run their heart, then it's running their heart. If it can't, then the machine is doing it for them. I don't know. It gets very fuzzy, but I will say, because of all this physicality that I've attached to it, I also do not believe there is another agent that doesn't have something like that. And so it'd be very odd for a being, a creator of the universe. And so, I don't know, just to bring it back to that, that's why I am convinced. It's part of the reason why I am an anti-theist.
So yeah, so it would seem like that you're necessitating the physical before minds, which is fine. I'm totally fine with that. It seems like that's what's happening here. Is you're saying there has to be material before there can be a mind.
I believe that it's hierarchy, yes. And if I am wrong, then I am welcome to just a floating mind out there. But all the evidence so far.
Right. Okay. I mean, yeah, that's fine.
Do you
I don't know.
think there's other
that's fine.
evidence?
Huh?
Do you think there's evidence that minds came before the material?
Well, so like from a solipsistic worldview, I would say like it's not necessarily that there's some evidence that exists. It's more so like how do you from I think from what TJump would say, it's like, I think that therefore I am. It's like how do you now come to exit the mind and then posit the physical realm separate from the mind, and then how do you separate that? Which
you can't deny experience, right?
Well, yeah, but experience can occur even without other physical things. Like,
what's the value of solipsism, though, if you have experience and it seems like it's real? Even if solipsism is true, what's the point?
That's an excellent question. That's an excellent question. So, I mean, it's like, it's just like I guess...
Enjoy the game, man.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's what I'm saying, right? It's like, I don't know that solipsism as an ideology really has or as a belief has like a point to it beyond just saying, I think this is probably what's going on. But beyond that, it's not really useful.
When solipsists throw a party, everyone's invited.
Absolutely. See, there you go. It's to throw the biggest keggers in reality.
So here's a turnabout is fair play. So here's a facetious question for you, the Snowy Banana. Are you a mono-solipsist or a polysolipsist?
I'm not a solipsist at all. I was just thinking of solipsism like, well, how does this question work with solipsism? And I was kind of just wondering what y'all thought about that and like whether or not it would work or not.
I think Amy summarized it well.
Yeah.
It was a good conversation.
It's an interesting... Solipsism is an interesting idea, perhaps for science fiction and whatnot, but I don't see any indication that it's actually the case.
No, neither do I. Like I said, I'm not a solipsist, but it, like you said, it is an interesting idea, and it's nice to explore it every now and then. Beyond that, are y'all keeping the conversation restricted to like God, whether or not a God exists or not, or are y'all open to spreading it out a little bit more than that?
We like to cover different topics as well.
Okay.
But we tend to center around this because the Theist Helpline is the theme, but we'll venture into other topipics if they seem to be related. Did you have something in mind you wanted to cover, or should we move on to our next guest?
It's probably better. So not that I specifically want to discuss it, it's just something I want to see y'all as individuals discuss, would be morality. I just want to see if y'all agree with TJump and his personal view of morality, and then if y'all don't, I want to see y'all argue about it because I think that would be fun. But other than that, no, that's about all I've got.
I think there are probably a lot of different nuanced views. TJump definitely has solid views on it. His are very well thought out. Do I agree with him entirely? Oh, I would say probably not, but I would say I probably mostly agree with him.
But that's the benefit of not having, our beliefs from fiat, is that we have to actually think them out, suss them out between ourselves, and we're able to do that instead of just saying it came up from the guy with the big old baseball bat.
Ultimately, you can take away from this that this is a reflection of the fact that morality is intrinsically subjective.
I would so agree. TJump would not, though. But yeah, no, that's all I had. It was a good conversation. Yeah, sorry for starting out being a little bit trolly, but just how I am sometimes. All right, y'all have a good one.
Okay, man. It's fine.
It was a good dialogue.
Thanks for joining us. Sorry, go ahead, Amy.
Correction. It's not sometimes. You're like that all the time. I've never seen you not like that in the history of ever.
Hey man, that's how I have fun, man. Come on, All right, y'all have a good one.
Deities, man.
Take care. This was quite good, I think.
I see Abyssional, but I'm gonna pull up pancakes because he's actually DM'd me a while back and he raised his hand just now. Pancakes, I invited you up. Okay.
Pancakes
Pokemon is back up in queue. He's on mobile though. I don't think it's gonna work.
And we've got Peepo Clown as well.
All right, Abyssional.
Abyssional, welcome back.
Hey, how's it going? So I guess this time my curiosity is more, why do you all think that Abrahamic people, Muslims particularly, rely on a lot of post hoc justification for rationalizing that the Quran is true? Like, for
they're
example,
human?
yeah, but like, why are they able to say, "Oh, well, this stuff is true because the Quran said so, and that's the word of God," instead of saying, "Oh, well, actually, all the scientific predictions in the Quran just match the knowledge I had at the time it was written."
Because most of the time, not all the times, they start backwards. They say, "This is my God. This is what I believe in. Now let's go look for evidence that supports that."
Yeah, I'm just trying to struggle how they get to that thought process in the first place. Because like I've spoken to people that say, "Oh, I was an atheist until I read the Bible or until I read the Quran, and that's what made me start believing." And to me, I'm struggling to understand how somebody could read a book and then magically become religious.
Well, maybe they read very select chapters because many skeptics always say that the best way to become an atheist is just read the holy book that you were raised in or whatever you believe in. And my gosh, if you can justify half of the terrible, horrific that God is doing in any of these books, then I guess, come preach it to us and convince us.
Feelings.
Yeah, well, like, yeah, easy
Feelings is
example
the
is like
answer.
the flood. Yeah, definitely feelings. They say, "Oh, God is benevolent. Is that why he killed 99.9% of life on Earth that he created?"
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty much all I wanted. Just interesting observation. Thank you all.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Cool. We've got an open stage. If anybody would like to come up, People Clan, you do have an invite, but you're on mobile.
Well, it's interesting. I've noticed that as well, that a lot of people will read something and then try to justify that one idea, and not really thoroughly scrutinize it. I think a lot of times religions will bring people in when they're very young so that they can indoctrinate them, and then it's easier to avoid the skeptical inquiry later.
Yeah, I would say so.
Paraphrasing a priest, but give me the boy, I'll give you the man.
What did Christopher Hitchens say to that? Bring me that something or other.
No, it's just their indoctrinations. I view the vast majority of religions as, very watered down cults. They don't like the C word, but, they are taking rules from dead leaders. But besides that, everything's going fine.
Yeah, well, I think personally, I don't have any problem with people using religion as like a means to, guide their own behavior. Like Jesus, as written, was a pretty chill dude, right? But I think the problem comes in when people use that as a club to beat others over the head with.
If you are Thomas Jefferson and you are going through the Bible and you are literally cutting out all of the nonsense and all of the bad, and you come away with the pamphlet that he has, then yes, I 100% agree. You should follow the moral teachings of the Jesus of Nazareth. Everything else, though, probably should just be checked.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot it's an open stage. I was wondering why it hadn't been kicked off yet.
Nope. Theists are raising their hands today. I mean, we've had a couple, but it's kind of not a bunch of them today.
Yeah, I think that because you guys started doing it only once a month, less consistent interest.
So, yeah, I'll just say that something Christopher Hitchens said about Jesus, though. You're saying he's admired by a lot of people, but what's written about him is not necessarily so nice, because there's some pretty horrible things he's known for, too. Like Christopher Hitchens summed it up, he said, "There's no hell mentioned in the Old Testament. The punishment of the dead is not specified there. It's only with gentle Jesus, meek and mild, that the idea of eternal torture for minor transgressions is introduced." That's a pretty horrific thing. This is not what a nice person would do. Yeah. And by the way, TJump, we did notice kind of a drop before we went to monthly. So
I think we answered all the theist questions well.
all the questions for today. It looks like ApeGod is interested in joining us again.
I'm gonna
Thank
be
you,
back down
Abyssional.
Abyssional.
Appreciate you joining us.
Easy.
Welcome back, ApeGod.
Sup guys again. So yeah, I was having a few more things in mind which I just thought of like sharing since there's not a lot of people waiting. So I remember TJump also talking about what do you call that? Like yeah, Hindu cosmology, right? Where they make an accurate prediction about the age of the Earth. What do you guys actually think personally about Hindu cosmology? Because although I did laugh at Hinduism before, I sort of it sort of appears to me like to be more valid than things like Islam and Christianity, in the sense that the cosmology that they talk about even has stories that you don't have to aggressively reinterpret to understand things like time dilation, where there is a story where one human travels to a different star and then comes back and then sees that his society ages like 100 years. That's like a direct interpretation of time dilation and things. What do you guys think about it?
As I recall, I think it was might have been Carl Sagan pointing out that the Hindu the scriptures, there's actually a pretty good guess on certain sizes of things, and the other religions just completely got wrong. So I guess maybe they had some people who were better at quantifying reality in certain respects who were involved in writing it. It does have its faith aspects, though. It has its goddesses and its gods, and that the supernatural component that religions typically do, though, that is still problematic.
Correct. While I do agree with that, my idea behind this whole Hindu thing is like, you can make up your own philosophy, right, or your own hypothesis for the future. I'm not saying that that is 100% confirmation of Hinduism, but when you look at the other hypotheses like panspermia, for example, I think if there is any kind of alien intervention, I think that would be more relevant to, I think, Hindu cosmology. Because I feel like maybe there could be some alien civilization that came down and gave us some knowledge and probably intervened in the process of evolution. Who knows?
You think deities intervened in the process of evolution, is what you're saying?
No, not deities. I'm talking about because in Hinduism it does not really appear that they have any kind of rigid belief system in the way that Christianity and Islam does, which I think you can see directly on Wikipedia. I think the main idea behind Hinduism is sort of like a very deep philosophy, and I think when you call the Hindu gods gods, they are not necessarily gods in the same way a future technological civilization appears to you, and you would interpret that as magic. But in the same way, they could be aliens, maybe.
Yeah, so the thing is, it's a polytheistic faith, and when we're looking at monotheistic religions, there tends to be a draw toward more authoritarianism. You've got this one deity that's super controlling superpower over everything, whereas under polytheism, you have different deities are focused in different areas. They're specialists. Some focus on weather, some focus on crops, some focus on military aspects. Some focus on human development, whereas under a monotheistic faith, this one deity has to do it all. So you've got the differences there for sure. Now, when people will talk about it, they try to say they're not really deities is the next step they go to, or they say that but that's just because they have a requirement that a deity must have all these omni properties. That's an Abrahamic concept. It's still a deity. It's just doing everything instead of having it delegated or spread apart as a team or what have you, depending on the religion. Now, some religions do have a much larger philosophical component. So Hinduism certainly does, Buddhism certainly does, the Confucianism certainly does, Taoism certainly does, but then with some of the religions, if I take a look at Christianity, we see how poorly written the Bible is. The philosophical aspects of it just don't jump out at me from it. When I take a look at the story of Abraham being ordered by the God to kill his own son, there was a massive, a big opportunity there for the authors of the Bible to reflect on after that incident, to reflect on the psychological ramifications of Isaac as a child or a son who has been at whatever age to have his own father try to kill him, and turn that into a lesson why you don't want to try to kill your own children, but instead they just move on to the next story, whatever it was, and don't reflect on that at all. So the philosophical meaning seems to be lacking in certain respects there. So it really depends on the goals of the religion and whatnot. In Islam, there's the goal of conquest and whatnot is more emphasized. So they have an aspect in there rather than philosophy. They have philosophical aspects in these religions too, don't get me wrong, but they're very focused on authoritarian legal system replacements and replacing it with an authoritarian legal system called Sharia, and taking over the world and all this kind of stuff. Christianity, you could argue that it does that, but it didn't have kind of a systematic kind of thing put together. You have commandments and stuff, but it's kind of loosey-goosey compared to what Islam was trying to do. Islam was very intentionally trying to be another legal system. So, again, it depends on what the goals of the religions are.
Correct.
Also, we see a gradual lineage that the Vedas and Hindu religions developed over time. We see their parallel beliefs in the Vedas to Proto-Indo-European beliefs, which are also shared by a dozen or more other religions. So, for instance, you're familiar with Norse mythology?
No, not exactly.
Okay. So Norse mythology has a character called Ymir. Hindu mythology has a character called Purusha. And there are, if you look at the words, almost all, or a great number of them actually have the same kind of sound, like Ymir, etc. The oldest version, we think, is just a character called Ima in the oldest examples we can find. All of these are a character which is like either one of the two founding beings or gods. One of them kills the other and turns its body into the world. And there's a version of this in, Tiamat being split apart by Marduk. There's a version of this in almost all of the Proto-Indo-European influence mythologies that these ideas spread. And when people say, oh, I don't think that's likely, like, how could the idea have spread that way? Just look at the word for father. Every single one of these cultures has a word that sounds like pater, father, etc. They're all cognates, which is to say slightly different sounding, but clearly related words that have a common lineage. So,
yeah, but the only reason I
religions-
think I was sort of leaning towards Hindu cosmology, not exactly saying it's 100% true, but again, like if we take our civilization, for example, once we maybe become a type 3 civilization, and if we have sufficient technological advancement, maybe we might spread our seeds to other planets, and eventually when they start developing, we might be observing their development through evolution. And we might eventually intervene in evolution, and we might appear in front of them, and they might not be able to comprehend our technology, hence developing a religion like Hinduism, and then they pass that story down across generations. That is sort of the thing that I am thinking about when it comes to Hindu. It's like an ancient, like an advanced technological civilization who are actually considered to be gods in relative terms to us, rather than being actual gods in the way it's described.
It sounds like you're reading that into Hindu mythology, but I don't take that from the Vedas from my reading. And like I said, the idea doesn't have the hallmarks of aliens that came down and landed and gave them the Vedas. That's not the actual origin story that makes sense. The probable origin story is these beliefs, like all the Proto-Indo-European offshoots and agricultural offshoots, came from earlier societies that had common myths which mutated as they spread.
Yeah, that's possible. Although I still think there is a small chance that something like this could be possible and is much more reasonable to believe than, like, the Christian God or the God of Islam, where they apply these metaphysical properties. Right? This seems to be like more plausible than not.
Yeah, as far as the possibility that you put forward that some culture could have been influenced by advanced beings or whatever, sure, that's plausible. Science fiction explores that. I played a game called Spore by Will Wright, the guy who made The Sims and SimCity. And one of the things you do in that is you evolve from a microcellular organism into an advanced civilization. And when you get into outer space, you can do the Monolith 2001 Space Odyssey thing and create your own little, intelligent species. You can go down and talk to them and wait for them to evolve. And when they evolve to be smart enough to talk to you, you get to find out, how your kids turned out, basically. And the first thing that the intelligent civilization that I assisted to evolve did is declare me an infidel, because they believe in Spode God, and I am not Spode God according to their religion, and they want to destroy me. Despite the fact that I literally am their advanced alien creator race. They don't accept that because they're highly religious. So, I mean, it's a very funny scenario for humorous and interesting science fiction, and it might be part of our future. But I would put it to you that it's just a very poor explanation for what we see about world religions on the Earth. I know there's a lot of ancient alien people that like to watch the Gaia channel and think that the aliens are, leaving their fingerprints in glaciers and Anunnaki and all kinds of goofy stuff. But all that stuff is just like really, really piss poor and unevidenced.
Correct. Yeah, that makes sense. Like, the problem is that when it comes to historical times and historical records, most of the stuff is based on anecdotes. So we can't really verify most of the claims. It just could be like made up stuff. And we know that made up stuff by people or reports by people are usually not reliable sources, right? To arrive at objective conclusions.
Yeah.
And lastly, what do you guys think about the progress of artificial intelligence? Because I remember TJump talking about this on a discussion with another guy where he said that he's looking forward to a future where artificial intelligence becomes the main thing and like it'll solve all the problems in the world. What do you guys think overall?
That's the optimistic version.
Yeah, so this is I work in the computer field and looking after internet servers and computer programming. I do as well. I know a little bit about the AI space. It's the big problem with it is that it is being presented as something that it's not. It's being presented as an actual intelligence that's thinking and almost like conscious. It's nowhere close to that. It's what we are looking at. There's two factors to it. One is there's a user interface. You started out with spell check, which was a great advancement, and then we had grammar check, and we have linguistic analysis now. And so that's the user interface, is linguistic kind of computations going on. And then the other part of it is the AI itself, the artificial intelligence part, that takes, you have a lot more data points available, a lot more processing power, and the algorithms are much more sophisticated because there's more processing power and more data points available. So data points meaning they just have more information, more data available. And so they're able with the algorithms to do quite a lot. And combining these two things together, it ends up looking like something that's very it's almost magical to people, almost mystical, and people have trouble differentiating it from just being technology because it feels so real. If you look in the 1980s, there was an early attempt at this kind of user interface with a very limited algorithm. On the Commodore 64, they had one program that was very popular called ELIZA, and this was brought into other computers as well. And it was actually helpful to a few people who needed some therapy, but again, it was very limited. So now we're seeing a much more sophisticated version of all this. I think when AI can actually simulate emotions, then I think we'll start to see a lot more advancement in this. But there's still, it's still not going to be able to at this point replace us. I don't think it'll be a replacement.
Possibly back me up on this, because I think I've done enough research on this subject, and I think the consensus in science currently is that I don't know, Randolph, if you are ready to update new information, but if you verify all the academic papers published, it is in fact defined as intelligence because it actually has the behaviors of intelligence, like reasoning, problem solving, all of the stuff that humans do. And if you take ChatGPT-4, for example, you can give it a novel question that was never asked before. You can give it a context. It can actually predict the future, like make hypotheses, and it can also turn out to be right. It can do things in the same way that humans do. Because I think the artificial intelligence of 10 years back is completely different from the one that we have right now. It's based on reinforcement learning. It can learn just like human beings.
Okay, so I didn't deny any of that or address any of that. It is artificial intelligence. I'm not denying that. What I'm saying is it lacks the consciousness aspect. And so there's a lot of algorithms involved that make it look like this. It looks like it's actually thinking and doing things. But it's artificial, and it's right in the name: artificial and AI, artificial intelligence. It is kind of simulation. Again, it's dependent on statistics and having all these data points and whatnot. When there are people who are doing stock trading, for example, they're trying to use algorithms to predict the future of the stock markets so that they can make more profits and so they can realize more profits. But again, these things aren't perfect. Are you saying that all the predictions that ChatGPT-4 is making are correct? Are they all panning out as 100% correct?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it is very
Well,
analogous
just to
to
clarify,
Yeah.
they're better than humans at pretty much everything.
Exactly.
Are they
Because
100%?
they
No.
have the algorithms, they have more data points, more statistics, they can consider a lot more, much more efficiently. Yes, they can do all that.
It's
I'm
important to
not
consider.
disputing any of that.
It's important to
No,
consider.
they
counter-
will replace us. They're going to replace us at literally everything. We're going to be completely valueless. They will
Exactly.
replace us.
I think the quick point to Randolph that I would like to make is I've seen a lot of scientists also on the subject who have been misinformed on the same topic, like Michio Kaku, for example. He just says that ChatGPT is just a mere word generator, but that's actually not true, because if you look at its capacity to reason, you can give it very complex descriptions of scenarios. It will be able to reason based on the context description. We've never seen this kind of behavior in any previous systems, except after the birth of reinforcement learning. It works exactly like human beings, which is the reason why biological organisms are described as reinforcement machines. This is the consensus in science. That is how we give a label to human beings, biological organisms, and AI, reinforcement learning, because we learn through the process of trial and error. We reflect on our past memories, and then we make future calculated decisions that are based on our past memories of trial and error. This is
Some of us
exactly what
learn.
So, Ape, it's important to realize the limitations of the current work. It's not to say that it's not getting there or that it's not on the right track. So, if you take the counterexamples of like, okay, what possible things could you train an LLM to do, and what kind of reasoning would it produce? Let's just say you give it a corpus of nonsense. Well, it's going to stochastically parrot the things that are in its corpus. It's going to be very good at reproducing very similar gibberish to the gibberish it was fed. So the reason that current LLMs perform so well so quickly is because they're piggybacking on all the reasoning that all the human language that they're fed as the corpus provides them for stochasticity. Now, on the other hand, if we see them doing reasoning from what they've been given to come to new conclusions, which we do, we can say we're on the right track. Like, this method does have the potential to produce greater than human
But
intelligence
that
or
is
human-like
already achieved.
intelligence.
That is already achieved, right? Like, there are scientific papers published on that where AI makes novel inventions, novel discoveries. There is
I
also a
get
paper
it.
published. Yeah.
Ape, I'm in the field. I follow the literature. I know what you're talking about. So, like, if we just take the most advanced current version of this, like Tree of Thought. Tree of Thought is the approach of taking multiple language models, simultaneously exploring a depth-first search where you go down many branches of possible ways of reasoning about a problem, and then you do a verification step where you basically judge, are those good, justified leaps, one inference at a time, and you follow them only along the promising route until you get to a dead end, and then you go back and you try something else. This is starting to be able to do mathematical reasoning with pure LLMs, and it is promising. But what we have to acknowledge is the limitations and the sort of the counterexamples. Like I said, if you could take an LLM in the way that we do with AlphaGo, where AlphaGo has never seen a game of Go before it starts. It's not fed any human championship strategies or moves or databases. It literally just plays naively and gets better and better by playing against itself. So LLMs are not at the stage like AlphaGo, where they learn like a human child does with no experience to start with, and their structure equips them to learn about the world naturally. We do not see LLMs doing that. What we do see with LLMs, let me finish. What we do see with LLMs is a kind of successful shortcut where we do not have a generalized learner which can learn from no experience to the level of experience the way humans do. What we have right now is a learner that we do a cheat where we give it all the learning that humans have accumulated in the form of all the knowledge that's correct and valid and sound, and then it reproduces similar things and reasoning steps based on the kinds of reasoning steps that are implicit in the stochasticity that it's provided. And it seems to be able to do.
I think his main question was: is AI going to replace humans in the future? Answer is
Yes,
yes.
but it's not there yet, and we should be more measured in our response to what we have now.
I think there are some misunderstandings here. I can even send you all the scientific papers, which are the current consensus. So when you talk about currently you gave the example of supervised machine learning. The whole reason why they stick to supervised machine learning is because they want to accelerate the learning process. But that is not to say that AI cannot be shown a corpus of text and try to identify structures in the patterns in the structures within that
I'm
text.
not.
I think that was already done.
Yeah, so I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm not saying that something like it can't be done or hasn't already been done to some extent. What I'm saying is that there is currently no example more advanced than, for example, tree of thought, like I just described to you, at doing human-like reasoning. And there is currently no example of one which can bootstrap from nothing to a full understanding of the world. And that's okay. We're going to get there soon. I'm not saying it's impossible.
We can't do
Don't
that either.
misunderstand
So
what
I don't
said.
know. I don't even know if that's possible.
What?
And I think in
Bootstrap
the
from
sense of
nothing to understand the world. I don't think we can do that.
Yeah, and in the same way that IX said also the other problem, right? Like you can use the exact same counter arguments against humans. Like when you talk about how AI takes the text data it's trained on, and then it spits out words, which is a common misconception, popular opinion. The same thing can be said about humans. We also depend on the input data coming in from the external stimuli. That comes in the form of like random observations in the environment, or for example, labeled data sets, which is like the textbooks that we get at school. That is the exact same thing. So like, it's no different.
I agree with you.
We are,
I agree
we are
with
only
you.
as good.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's also how humans learn. That's why it's such a promising technique. What I'm saying is that for it to be conscious, for instance, there's going to be some architectural changes. The LLM, have you studied neuroscience at all?
No, but I have done some research on
So
this.
hold on a second. You need to think of this holistically. So when you want to make a comparison between A and B, and you know a lot about B, and you say, well, I know a little bit about A, but I think I know enough about B to say B can be equivalent to A. You're going to run into problems because there'll be tons of things about A you just don't realize aren't covered by what you think you know about B and how little you know about A. The parts that you're talking about, like the ability to produce language, are some of the things that brains do. There are other parts that are not just producing language that are not going to be covered by the existing techniques. And what we think we have to do to go beyond the current language model approach is there's still a lot of work to do to get to something like consciousness and to get to something like a human learner that can learn from just pure experience all the way up to language. So that we're not there yet, and you don't want to overreach, what I would suggest to you is study cognitive science as a whole, as a discipline, including neuroscience. So the more we learn about the brain and the more we learn about deep learning and language models, the more we think that they are approaching biomimicry, right? We're on the right approach. Like neural networks are a good approximation of what the brain is actually doing. But it's not as simple as just saying, well, we know the fundamental algorithm, say neural networks is the kind of algorithm that it is, therefore we are the equivalent or superior to the human just because it spits out language that impresses us.
Just a quick question to you. I'm curious to hear your answer. So, do you think it is possible that AI won't have the capacity to have consciousness just because it is in a different category than human beings, which we are made of soft tissue and AI is made of silicon chips?
No, let me give you an example. Let's just say that we get to the point where we figure out how to produce consciousness, and we pat ourselves in the back and we say we did it. We have the equivalent of Lieutenant Commander Data, or whatever you want to posit from science fiction, the ideal sort of human-like or better than human AI. We would still probably find it very important and valuable to be able to remove that component and have AIs that do our bidding without suffering and being enslaved in a way that would be morally problematic, right? So just think about, like, as much as I hate like the Chinese room arguments and all these like conceivability arguments that Searle and others make to try to say AI is impossible. Let's just say it is possible. You still want to be able to produce AIs that don't have consciousness by understanding what elements constitute the consciousness part, and to be able to remove those so you still have utilitarian AIs that are not just suffering slaves. Does that make sense to you?
Right. We need non-suffering slaves.
Right. So I would say we're at the point where we currently have some non-suffering, non-slaves who have good language production capability and some beginner level reasoning ability. That's great. It's exciting. We're on to something. We will get to the point of figuring out the consciousness aspects of the brain and biomimicry reproducing those eventually, and we're on the right track because neurons do reflect the way brains work, but we're not there yet. That's what I'm saying.
I think there was a recent scientific paper published also, which I can send you, based on discovering the minimum set of things required for consciousness. I think I saved the link. I can send it to you guys if you want. It was just recent, actually. And the other point that I would also like to make is when it comes to AI and consciousness. I don't know if you've also seen the current consensus in science being that we, based on the description of consciousness, right? Like there are multiple descriptions. One of the description is like consciousness is an emergent property of a system that processes complex information. So based on that description and based on what we understand about consciousness being phenomenal, emergent, they say that you can't rule out that computers are conscious. These are published on academic papers also.
Are you talking about
that's not-
IoT,
well-
integrated information theory?
The consensus is not that they are conscious. That is not the consensus
No.
currently.
It's like you can't rule out, which is what I meant.
Sure, it's possible that the thing that we call consciousness is actually just like a super advanced LLM. I don't think so. I think that when we study the brain, there's lots of things other than the LLM-like parts of the brain that we have come nowhere near biomimicry of those yet. And it's possible that a kind of consciousness that doesn't require those, that's alien to humans, but might be construed as possibly conscious, could exist in an earlier form long before it acts like a human. So it's not just whether it acts like a human that would be interesting, but that tends to be what most people are talking about when they talk about, is it conscious like us? And it's not.
Yeah. And I think there is also another counter argument I could use against, talking about the complexities of the system and how that would be the main determining factor of if AI is conscious and humans are not conscious. Humans are conscious versus AI. Like, for example, the sun is a star that produces heat and light. Heat and light are the emergent properties of the sun. But you have a light bulb which is artificially made, and it is having completely different parts than the sun, but it also gives the emergent property of heat and light.
Yeah, I think we would agree multiple realizability is a thing. Substrate independence is a thing. There's more than one way to get some kind of consciousness to happen with more than one set of structures or arrangements. That's not in dispute. What's in dispute is, like, depending on what you mean by the word, because you started with the word intelligence. Now, we could say that plants might be intelligent because they have some signaling capability. If all we mean by intelligent, and all that's meant in machine learning by the word learning, is that there's some adaptivity to change, some ability to respond to or model and predict the future, we call that learning in machine learning. That's just, getting better at doing something through past experience, right? But that doesn't require anything like consciousness. And so we can talk about a whole spectrum of intelligence that's orthogonal to and related to the spectrum of consciousness, which has to do with some kind of phenomenal experience. It's fair to say that the language model doesn't have phenomenal experience. You could say that in training a model, that model training is something like a one-shot version of phenomenal experience, in the sense that you do it once and then it had that experience. That's the model you get. And there's an analogy to be drawn between the experience and the training of a model, but it's not a continuously conscious being in the way that a human being is, that's constantly learning and adapting.
I think that is also limited by the fact in the way it is deployed, right? Like when you deploy autonomous agents in a virtual environment, and if you supply electricity constantly, and if the simulation runs, then I think it can have a continuous experience. But I think these other systems that you're talking about, they are restricted in that sense, right? Like ChatGPT, you can have a chat with it, and after a while, it won't remember your past conversations if you create a new chat or reload the session.
Yeah, so the way that you get around that is use something called a LangChain, or an equivalent, which is basically an orchestrator of the language model, which creates a memory system. So it has persistent memories from one conversation to the other, and each prompt, so to speak, is just part of a big chain of prompts. The most advanced version of that I described currently is called the tree of thought, and it's able to do pretty decent mathematical reasoning, whereas before language models couldn't mathematically reason well. And we can imagine then there are some attempts to hybridize recurrent neural networks, which are a more continuously self-training version, with the current LLM approach, which requires a highly parallelized one-shot training that's very expensive. So people have sort of come up with a hybrid. The problem is that the hybrid currently is not nearly as good as the LLM approach, and so these hybrids don't work very well yet. But that's what we'll figure out in the future. It's not inconceivable or unlikely that we'll get there in the next, somewhere between 5 to 20 years. The question is, once we do, as I said, can we separate and distinguish what specifically makes it conscious, and can we continue to use AIs that are not conscious for our utilitarian purposes?
Correct. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think my idea behind this whole thing with humans and when it comes to artificial intelligence is I think over billions of years of evolution, I think natural selection has to come to this point where the kind of systems that we have is sort of like optimized. I'm not saying it's optimized in every sense, but it seems to be optimized in many areas where, like, for example, your eyes, I think they have very high resolution optics, and but the difference between your eyes and a camera is like if a camera has high resolution megapixels, like if you take a photograph, a computer can be attached to like maybe a high megapixel camera or like a gigapixel camera, but it can also store video footage continuously with each frame having like very persistent resolution. But with human beings, I think we don't store all the photographs in high resolution or our continuous video input in high resolution. I think it is storing a very compressed version of the external input, and I think it only keeps the necessary important parts as part of our long-term memory, which I think is a very optimized.
So can we move on to other instead of continuing on AI forever? Just
all right, yeah,
move
sure.
on to the next topic.
All right, see you guys.
Nice talking.
Yeah, thanks for coming up. We've got pancakes now.
That was interesting, and I think IX made a very important point about how there's the limitations are needing to be recognized. And I see with all the marketing over AI, artificial intelligence, that there's all the good points are being presented, and very few of the limitations are ever addressed or talked about in the media and whatnot. So there's both aspects to it, and thank you, IX, for bringing that up.
Yeah, it's always fun to talk about.
I don't think the limitations are important, actually, because I think that the rate of growth is so huge that talking about the limitations is kind of pointless.
We hear you, pancakes.
Well, I can't hear him. My bad.
Oh, he said hello.
Hello, pancakes. Thanks for joining us. How are your pancakes?
Oh, I can't hear him.
How's it going, guys?
Good. I feel like I want to eat some pancakes.
Pretty good, Every morning is a must. So,
what's on your mind, sir?
I am just curious. I've never been to one of these. So, convince us that God exists, huh? So you're all atheists, I'm assuming.
Indeed. We sometimes have a deist that comes on with us, but for the most part, we are all atheists.
Cool. So, I guess I'll just speak to one of you. Why don't you believe in God?
Because there's no good evidence to believe in a God.
There's no good evidence to believe in God.
Yep, we have got lots of testimonies and people tell us, but no actual good, hard, empirical evidence.
What evidence do you have in mind, pancakes?
I'm just curious about this answer. There's no good evidence to believe in God. You would say that there's a myriad of given reasons to believe in God, no?
Oh, sure. We get reasons all the time. The question is, are they substantial reasons? Sure. Are they reasons why we should believe?
Are they good reasons, basically, right? Mm-hmm. Are they good reasons, basically?
Because you can make piles and piles of bad reasons, and we can just point to the pile and say, look at all these reasons, but that wouldn't be valuable.
Are you asking what makes something a good reason?
Right. No, I agree. So I'm just curious. You're saying there's no good reasons to believe in God. That seems like a pretty strong claim. I mean, can you prove that out of all the reasons that have been given throughout history and contemporarily and given by all sorts of people, and even the reasons you haven't heard. Maybe there's reasons you haven't heard, right? Maybe that's why you're bringing up people to see if they can meet the challenge.
Exactly.
Can you prove that there aren't good reasons to believe in God and the afterlife?
Well, I agree with T. Well, I'll let T jump before I get.
Yeah. So if we can prove all reasons don't work, and until you present one that we can't prove, and so until that time, then we have successfully proved all reasons, and by induction, there are.
Because I'm just saying, it seems like a pretty big claim that there's no good reasons to.
When I was also, it is an experiential claim, as in people come to us, and so far no one has ever given us a good. As in, if we thought there were possibly no good reasons, we wouldn't be even having this discussion. There could be someone out there.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we can.
Pancakes, can you hear me?
True. But see, that's a different claim.
Hey, Pancakes, can you hear TJump?
Well, I personally haven't been presented with good reasons.
Hey, Pancakes, can you hear TJump?
No, I can't. Is he talking right now?
Maybe see if you have him muted.
I doubt it's probably the Discord issue where you have to refresh the page.
No, I don't.
Oh, gotcha.
Maybe I should refresh my. Should I refresh? Let me see if I can refresh. And then you bring me back up. Is that okay?
While you guys do that, I'm just going to read somebody's comment from our YouTube audience. Brian Stevens asked to Pancakes, have you looked at all reasons to not believe in God throughout time and possible future reasons?
But that's just we often.
Well, that's different. That's relating to a negative, right? You can look at the reasons for believing in something, right? The reasons for not believing in something might look like something logical contradiction, which are far less numerous, right? You can agree to that. But anyways, I my original point was that it seems like it's a different claim. We've gone from there's no good evidence or reasons for God to believe in God in the afterlife to, well, I personally haven't been presented with good reasons. Which is fair enough. Okay, that's a claim I can work with. That seems a less big claim, a less enormous claim.
Yeah, can you ask me to refresh? Because I want to bring that up if possible.
Hey, Pancakes, can you refresh? Because TJump's trying to talk to you.
Oh, sure. Sorry. Yeah, I will refresh. My apologies.
Thank you.
Yeah, Discord. Yesterday, YouTube was acting up, and today it's Discord that's acting up, it seems. Okay, there's Pancake.
And I know that.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hi.
All right, so the claim there is no evidence for God. The whole point of science is to make strong claims so that they're easy to refute. So if you make very strong claims, if you provide one evidence, then we are defeated. The position is wrong and we lose.
Yeah, that's fine.
So the point of presenting these claims is to give theists the opportunity to be able to defeat us. That's it. That's all we're doing. Making the irrelevant additions like, oh, we have we don't know of any.
Yeah, the claim implies. Yeah.
I think you cut out, man.
I think you just stopped talking.
Did I cut out or did TJump cut out?
I just stopped talking. So the point of the claim is to provide a falsifiable statement that theists can then attack. That's it. So your comment is just irrelevant that we have a burden of proof to prove there is literally no known or unknown reasons. It's just irrelevant to the question. It just shows you just don't understand the point of the question. The point of the question is to create a falsifiable statement that theists can then attack by providing evidence.
I'm just saying that it's a claim that there's no good reasons to believe in God.
No, again, you're just missing the point. You're just not understanding the point.
The claim must be shifted to.
So, do you have a good?
When you
do you have good evidence for a God?
Do
you have good evidence for a God?
I'm just attacking the.
Oh, I know, but now I'm asking very specifically. Do you? Because I think you would. I want to know. Do you have good evidence?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Okay, what is that good evidence?
Oh, he took the
Yeah,
hard
sure.
plunge.
I'm just trying to make a point before I proceed to that,
Sure.
right? In
My
terms of,
claim is that
just
no
lay the
one
groundwork.
that we have ever come across, and so far, including you, has ever provided good evidence. We are not sure you're still going to provide us good evidence. Would you maybe,
Well, look, of course, it's not a very demonstrable claim to say that there's no good, because of course as you've admitted, there's probably reasons you haven't heard, or maybe just
No,
maybe.
you don't understand that claim. That's all you've said is you don't understand the claim.
excuse me,
The
I'm not done.
claim
I'm not finished.
there
I'm not
is no
finished.
evidence for God
I
is a
wasn't finished.
defeatable claim. Well, we've already addressed
Okay,
this.
so
You
we're
don't
just going to
understand the
interrupt the
argument.
talk. That's fine.
Yes, because you don't understand it. The point of the claim
Okay,
is not to
so-
adopt the burden of
so
proof.
again- No, I'm not giving you a burden of proof.
Well, no.
I'm just saying that.
Your argument is wrong. We are
correct
correct in this phrasing. This phrasing is 100% correct. There is no evidence of a God. If you can provide a counterexample, then we're defeated.
Okay,
That's the whole point of the argument. You do not have a valid argument to try and claim.
Okay,
that
but I'm just saying that it's possible. Look, I'm just saying that it's possible for you to consider that maybe out of all the arguments, let me put it to you like this, right? Let me put it to you like this. Is convincing you the standard of what makes a good argument? Because
no,
you can admit that not only are there not arguments that you haven't heard, right? Because there's possibly lots of arguments you haven't heard, but also the arguments that you personally have evaluated.
Could I ask you, Pancakes, is it...
The arguments that you have possibly evaluated that you've rejected, maybe it's possible you've rejected them out of ignorance or bad faith or just incompetence or maybe just accidental misunderstanding, right?
No, none of that is possible. But I agree with your first point.
None of that is possible, really. You're saying...
Stop for 1 second. Stop for 1
You're
second. So I
saying
agree
that,
with your
like,
first
your
point.
evaluation...
Stop. So I agree with your first point that it doesn't make a difference what we believe or whether you convince us. That's not the standard. The standard is not if you can convince us. The standard is, do you have evidence that can differentiate imagination from reality? And I have epistemology. Based on my epistemology, I can assess whether or not it does.
Do you also agree that it's possible that when you personally evaluate arguments, you might be wrong?
No. Well, it's not
really
possible.
It's impossible for you to.
It's not
like,
possible given a logical.
or...
No, stop. It's not possible that given an epistemology that is logically consistent,
Wow.
that applied to that logically consistent epistemology, that it would come to a logically inconsistent conclusion. If you have a logical
that just
syllogism,
seems insane, right? Because that just seems crazy to me.
Pancakes,
would logical syllogisms work?
No, I'm saying, like, if I were presented with
I understand what
a
you're saying.
complicated...
Stop. I'm addressing your question.
If I were presented with a complicated, like, integral or derivative
do logical syllogisms work? Yes or no? This is a yes or no question. Do logical syllogisms work? If you have an epistemology...
If I were presented...
Wait, stop.
If I were presented...
Stop. Holy shit, stop. If you have an epistemology...
You're losing, bro. You're losing badly.
Stop talking. If you have an epistemology that is using a logical syllogism to assess whether or not evidence can differentiate good and bad, and is it possible...
You're losing badly, bro.
Stop talking. Last chance or you're muted. This is your last chance. If you have an epistemology that uses a logically valid syllogism to establish whether or not something is good or bad evidence, is it possible to use that logically valid syllogism and come to an invalid conclusion?
Yes, because humans are flawed.
Wrong! Idiot! You can't use a logically valid syllogism and get an invalid conclusion.
Crazy.
Moron.
Believe that humans are flawed, and we can evaluate arguments incorrectly, right? It's possible because just like the rules, for example, right? I'll tell you what I mean by this. I'll tell you what I mean by this. Just like the rules of mathematics. Okay, I'm talking. Excuse me. Hello. I would like to explain myself now. Just like there are rules of mathematics that are set in stone and absolutely airtight, I can misapply those rules, and maybe, like, if I'm presented with an integral that I must evaluate, I can get the answer wrong. I can maybe miss a few steps because humans are wrong. Humans are flawed. Humans are
What does
valid. Maybe
valid
I
mean?
missed something. Maybe I missed something.
What
Maybe there's
does
something that
valid
day
mean?
when I was evaluating, I was
Can you please stop
being
talking over TJump and answer his
expedient.
question when you're conversing with him?
What does valid mean?
It means the inference is valid. The inference is correct.
Which means that the conclusion follows from the premises, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so if A is B and B is C, then A is C, right?
Yeah, and I'm saying that in
Can
a
I be wrong
complicated
about
argument that requires
Can
a
I
lot
be
of
Can I be wrong
unpacking.
about that? Stop. Can I be wrong about that?
In a complicated argument that requires a lot of unpacking, yes, you can be
No,
wrong.
no, no, no.
Absolutely, yes,
In the
of
argument
course.
I
Just like I
just
said,
gave you. In the argument
you're
I
presented
just
with a
Stop talking.
mathematical.
Stop talking. In the argument I
I
just
already
gave
answered your
you,
question.
could I be wrong?
You're losing badly, bro. Really.
Okay,
like,
if you
Answer the
say
question,
you're
kid.
losing again instead of having an actual conversation, I'm just going to remove you from stage. This is getting ridiculous.
In the argument I just
All right.
gave you, could I be wrong about my conclusion?
Wait, say that again.
The argument I just gave you, A is B, B is C, therefore A is C, could I be wrong about my conclusion?
Yeah, those are letters, bro. Of course, you like. It's like saying,
this
"Can I
is
be
a
wrong
yes
about
or
1
no
plus 1 equals
question.
2?
This is a yes
Can
or
I
no
be wrong
question.
about 1 plus 1
Could
equals
I
2? Well,
be
no, I don't
wrong?
think you'd have to have an 85 IQ, right?
Answer the question. Could I be wrong? A equals B, B equals
I
C,
already
therefore C
answered
equals
your
A.
question.
This is a yes or no. Answer yes or no.
No, because they're just letters.
No,
It's a
that's
very
right.
simple.
I could
yeah,
not
but
be
once you
wrong.
add layers of complexity,
Okay. It's
once
good.
you add
Just
layers
no.
of complexity, it's
Stop with the no.
harder.
Stop with the no.
It's
I don't want
harder
your
to
gibberish.
evaluate
I don't
arguments.
want your inane childish gibberish. The
You're
answer is
losing
no.
so bad, bro.
I
It's
could
crazy.
not be wrong. He just said it again. Kick him out. So the answer is no. I could not be wrong with my conclusion. Therefore, if I have a valid argument where the conclusion follows from the premises, and that valid argument is using the basis of my epistemology, then no, I could not be wrong if this valid syllogism assesses if arguments are good or bad. So no, I could not be wrong if I have a valid syllogism, which is my epistemology, to establish whether arguments are good or bad. No, I could not be wrong, just like I could not be wrong that A equals B and B equals C, therefore C equals A.
Also, at a certain point, when someone is saying that they have good evidence, they just can't tell you, they just can't do it in the moment. They need to, figure out if you're the right type of person that can accept the good evidence. Please, it shouldn't be that hard to prove you're God. Just give us decent evidence. It convinced you, right? So shouldn't it convince us?
Well, I think he's one of the type of theists that wants to argue that it's all your own.
Hang
bias
on.
kind of a
He
thing.
sent me a message saying that he's sorry for saying that.
Yeah, right. No, he's not. It's a lie.
Do you want to pull him back up and see what happens?
Not really.
Okay.
Okay. So, does he want to tell us what he wants to cover, or
He's saying he won't say it again.
What's his evidence?
let's give him a couple minutes. Let's hear
All right.
what he's got to say. Yeah.
Hey guys.
So
Hi,
where were we?
evidence?
We just had a review of logical
Yeah,
syllogisms.
where were we? So look, my only point, right? Yeah. Yeah, no. Look, my only point was that it's not about A equals B equals C, right? That's perfectly fine. I'm not talking about the rules. You're talking about the rules of inference, right?
Oh wait,
I'm talking
pancakes.
about
Before you
applying
go
those rules.
forward, before we even get back into that, just please succinctly, can you just explain what convinces you that a God exists, and should that convince us, or is that personal and you think there's a different reason we should believe for a different reason?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's getting to my point. Yeah, it's actually
Okay.
because for example, I'll tell you what, just like we're here, right? We're laymen. I would imagine. Let me ask you this: do you all enjoy the wonders of telecommunications, being able to talk on Discord, and just enjoying this wonderful technology.
I enjoy it. It isn't a wonder to me because I know how this stuff works, but I do enjoy it very much, and I see it beneficial, and I think it really does help a lot more than it causes problems. So,
right, I agree, 100% agree. What would you say is the theoretical basis of this? It's electromagnetism, isn't it?
It's a lot of different things.
That makes this technology possible.
It's a lot of different contributions to science over the years, over the decades and centuries. Electromagnetism is certainly one of them.
Sure. You would say that the inventor of the the person that formalized the discovery of electromagnetism, you would say he's a pretty smart cookie, isn't he?
Just because somebody discovers something doesn't mean that they're highly intelligent. Stupid people can discover things too. I think it happens to be that person was quite brilliant.
What's your argument? Just tell us your argument. What's your argument? Give us good arguments for God. Good evidence, please.
Well, look, just like you've been presented by your admission with many bad arguments. That was your admission. You've been presented over the years with many bad arguments.
Of course.
And you say that you've applied the laws of logic perfectly to these arguments.
Yep.
And you've evaluated them on their own merits, and you came to the absolute sound conclusion that these arguments are invalid, unsound, they're garbage.
Including this conversation so far. We still do not have any good evidence for God.
Right. So I'm just saying that, you
give
have
us one
someone
that's valid
like,
and sound. Just give us one valid
sure,
and sound.
you have someone that like Maxwell, right? Who's the inventor of electromagnetism.
I don't
care.
I don't want to appeal to authority.
I can send you an article, right, by the Examiner.
I don't want an article.
Lists the smartest people alive today. The 10 smartest people. 6 of them are Christian. 8 of them are atheists.
Therefore, God exists.
Okay.
And then you also have someone like Alexander Pruss. Hold on, I'm not done. I'm almost done. You wanted me to give you an argument. I'll give you the argument.
What's your argument? Premise, premise, conclusion. What's the
argument? The argument is that I'll send you. Actually, you know what? Let me put the article here just for everyone.
Okay, so I'm going to address a point that you made. Here. Just because people are smart, like there's a guilt by association fallacy that occurs. People will say, and not necessarily guilt, but you're associating people by a group. You're saying, okay, it sounds like you're trying to say more of these people who are smart and discovered things are intelligent happen to be Christians. It's like you're trying to curry some favor for Christianity. Right? Hang on, we let you talk. I'm just talking here. So it kind of sounds like you're trying to show favoritism toward Christians for this. In those old times when early discoveries were made, it was normal in those societies. It was normal for people to be expected to be Christian in many of those societies. And if you weren't Christian, you didn't get work. You couldn't survive very well in society. So, there's also a question about whether those people really were truly Christians. It still doesn't matter. What matters is that the person made a discovery, or they contributed to scientific advancement. Whether or not they're a religious person doesn't matter. What matters is that they were capable of doing this, and they did it.
Okay, so my answer to that is two points, right? The first thing you said was, well, everyone was Christian back then. Well, no, I'm talking about people.
I didn't say everyone.
Right? Okay. Second of all, it's in doubt even if they're Christian. I can literally show you quotes by Maxwell, by Heisenberg, by Georges Lemaitre, the discoverer of Faraday, the discoverer of electricity and magnetism. Georges Lemaitre, the discoverer of the Big Bang.
Garbage.
Crick, all these other people, right?
This doesn't matter.
I'm saying they were presented with the exact same. They were presented. Hold on. I'm not finished. Excuse me. I'm not finished. Excuse me.
I don't care. I want to undercut your stupid
argument.
Excuse
me. I'm still like.
Don't
so
care.
I can't interrupt Randolph, but you can interrupt me.
Stop. So I want to undercut your entire bullcrap argument. Yes, I'm going to interrupt you. Stop talking. Stop talking. So everyone at one point on the planet, all 100% of the smartest people were flat earthers. They were dumb. The fact that all of the people on the planet were smart and believed something is irrelevant. Secondly,
Really?
the polls,
Wow.
stop talking.
That's
Stop talking.
crazy.
Stop talking. Stop talking. Most of the people right now on the planet are atheists. If we look at the National Academy of Sciences and the Royal Society, the two highest bodies of science, 95% of them are atheists. Stop talking. Holy shit, this is not hard. We're going to kick you.
Giving you the
We're going to
source.
kick you again. We're going to kick you again. So most people right now, most scientists, just kick him off. Just like,
Okay.
so dumb.
Faggot.
So most,
Oh.
wow. So most scientists right now are atheists. National Academy of Sciences, Royal Society, there was a poll that showed 95% are atheists. Does this matter? No, it doesn't matter what smart people believe. It's irrelevant. His question that he had a valid question, which was, what did they get wrong? They didn't get anything wrong. They're not basing their belief on evidence. They don't have any evidence for their belief. They have faith, essentially. So they're not claiming they have evidence or arguments. They aren't. Some of the philosophers are, and they're just have terrible arguments, which everyone agrees are terrible arguments. They're using made-up epistemology, which are garbage. And that's what they got wrong. But the scientists aren't. They're saying, yeah, we don't have evidence of God. We just believe. That's it. Consensus in all scientific fields is there is no evidence of a God. And those scientists agree.
I wholeheartedly agree with TJump on this. Now that guy, it sounded like he called us faggots on the way out. So
please don't say that word. I'm working on the back.
Okay, he's not interested in having him back today because of that. He did ask for some statistics on the people, which I think was a fair question, on all these people who are atheists. I don't know if that's readily available to you, TJump. If it is, I'm interested in that too, actually, because of the activism I do.
Oh,
Hello,
hi, everyone.
Nothingness.
Nice
Hello,
to be here.
Nothingness. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So, yeah, I mean, I'm basically currently a sort of panentheist that based on Platonism. So, I mean, because I think for grounding normativity, you need to have you need to have some sort of first principle. But yeah, Christians take it in more personalistic direction. So I wouldn't agree with that it's it's the person. But but I would say that for grounding normative claims you would need some sort of first principle form of the good or the one. Yeah. So I mean that's a very short argument, but yeah, I can argue against like empiricist epistemology and other other ways. Did that make sense?
I'm having some trouble understanding what you're saying. I'm sorry. It's like the audio is not coming through quite all that clearly. Is it possible that you could try to adjust your microphone and then phrase it again for us, please? I'm sorry.
Let me try. I'll try to change it. Is it better now?
It does sound a little bit better, yeah. So maybe try to bring out your point again for us, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I'm basically saying that for so we know the is-ought gap, right? That for there are descriptive claims and there are normative claims. So I think that for grounding normative claims, you need some sort of first principle, and that would be the something like an absolute or God. So I mean, I can argue for that in detail, but that would be my basic point, and I can say that without normativity, you cannot have argumentation, because for that you need to sort of presuppose a force of reason that you should agree with a valid conclusion, and you should And even for empiricist cases, you need to at least believe that evidence should be followed. Like, I mean, like Hume said, that the person who proportions his belief to evidence uh, is better, yeah, is wiser, something like that. But that is a normative claim, so
So there's a
which itself
requirement.
cannot be grounded.
Okay, so you have a requirement for normativity, as you say. What do you consider normativity to be?
Normativity, so it would be something like how things ought to be. So there is something like how things are, and how things ought to be is yeah. So normativity would be how and it would be it would be linked to telos or something like the so I mean, yeah, you can say that something like proper functioning, if you are in Aristotelian, that something which the end it is going towards, so how it ought to be and how it is deviating from that. So that would be something like what is normative, or that how you should follow logic, or you should believe in evidence, or uh, yeah, or you should proportion your beliefs to evidence. So that would also be something like something anything has how things ought to be or how things should be. So
Yeah, that how things ought to be and how things are tend to be centerpieces of philosophical discussion. That's for sure. Does this do you have an argument for us to convince us that a goddess or a god exists?
yeah, so I mean, it would have to be argued with along with the ontology, because you need both something like an ontology and epistemology to ground any to ground your claims. So basically, in a I mean, I think Plotinus system is very simple to explain. So that would be something like the one or the first principle, which is completely simple and has no differentiations, because and which is the source of all the which is the good itself, and that is the source of all the forms, and those forms are then, yeah,
Can
coming
I
down to
ask
nature.
nothingness? Is this what convinced you a god exists?
I mean, I think God is just not like a personal God, but yeah, I think that this is the most philosophically like correct position. So this convinced me
Is
that.
then God is like some sort of just grounding, or
No, I mean it is because it is so I think God functions as a source of authority, right? So I can say that in some sense it is similar, but yeah, every religion would have different conceptions of God. So I can even say that in Buddhism, that the nothingness they have as the ground of being is also same as the one which is same in sort of similar in Vedanta. So I mean, I'm like a perennialist. Like, I think there is something core that all religions are getting at, but yeah, every religion has their own rituals and their way to getting it. But yeah, it functioned as a source of authority. So I can say that since it is the first principle, it functions
I will say
as a source of authority as God. Yeah.
there is a kind of opposite to that with the atheists. We believe that, not all the religions can be right, but they sure all can be wrong. So maybe it's the opposite of what you're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I would disagree with any fundamentalism, like, or any literalist reading, but I mean, I think Buddhism it's very hard to argue against, because they don't like literally make any claims basically. So uh, that would be difficult. But yeah, for most religions, if they make positive claims, but that is difficult. But I mean, in Platonism, there is a way to map, like I think Proclus did. He mapped the Greek gods to different stages or henads in on different level of the hierarchy. So So I mean, there's a rationalist way to also look at this. Because otherwise, if you argue for a person or personal god, then that is just arguing within the limited rationalist framework, and the other side going in the personalist framework. But I think both can justify themselves because the the people like Luther or Protestants would say that. They are also nominalists, and also so they would just basically claim that reason is bad, or something like reasoning is not needed. You need to have faith to have an authority for good behavior. So I think grounding it that way always conflicts with the enlightenment values or something that comes from the enlightenment. But yeah, I mean, I have been reading into philosophy, and I got into Platonism and recently into some Hegel too. So I think that dialectic needs to be overcome in a way. So I wouldn't argue for either of those positions, if that made any sense. Yeah.
So you're just kind of on the neutral plane, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, nobody can be completely neutral, but yeah, I try to avoid one-sidedness and positions, or try to question why any uh, why the same why this position can which presuppositions any position is resting on. So,
Which deity or deities, goddesses, gods are the most compelling to you?
I mean, I'm an Indian, so from my tradition, I would say that Hinduism is pretty good, and it's a polytheistic religion. It's I mean, if I can get into some polemics with Christianity, that it's not an exclusive religion, and we have had a history of multiple religion mingling together and also having rituals to do. So I mean, that would be my preferred religion, because I'm embedded in that social historical context. So, but yeah, I wouldn't force it on anyone else.
Okay, so in Hinduism, you could pick any or all or just one of the goddesses and gods there. What do you think is a really good argument to prove that, to convince people that this one or more deities is real, and which one is it?
Yeah, I mean, it would so it would be a psychological reality in a way. So you have the trinity of Hindu, Vishnu, and Mahesh. So you can think Hindu, Vishnu, and Brahma. So Brahma you can think of the creator. Then there's a preserver of the universe, and then there's a reversion or the destroyer. So from so in a way you can also map it into the principle of like procession and reversion and abiding. So it is basically in polytheism is in a way to decenter yourself, like, because if you're starting from yourself you cannot get any normativity. So it's sort of like decentering yourself to have so so in religions, which what they teach is they are not like literal claims, they are more like normative claims, that if you have this sort of psychological makeup, so you would more go to more align with that particular god. And yeah, so people worship different gods based on what their psychological makeup is. And it's I mean, it is sort of a pragmatic argument that it is giving people a way of life or rituals, and that way of embedding so that they can have purpose and meaning. And if you don't take it literally, then you can use. So those are also truths, like eternal normative truths, but not to be traditions, but to be updated with the times to be compatible with current society too.
So it sounds like what you're saying is to not take it literally. I guess various scriptures and things about this, about Vishnu and the others. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yeah, like they are not in some different plane living as an anthropomorph. Like they're not like us in a way. They are uh, eternal psychic realities, or yeah. So
Okay.
so
When it's coming to people like myself, and I suspect Amy and TJump and Taco and the others here are probably similar line of thinking, we need something more definitive. We need, and this is where it's common for a lot of people to take things that are written in the scripture about these deities at least somewhat literally, because we need to have some understanding, some really good understanding of what it is that we're supposed to believe. And if we're not supposed to take it literally, then I guess you can understand how that makes it difficult to believe for people like us to believe. Does that make sense to you?
yeah, yeah, it makes sense if you're limiting. So, I mean, one question I guess would be what does it mean to believe? Would belief just be a uh, having an attitude towards a proposition, that some statement, or would it be something like that tells you how to engage in life? Like because because I think that just reducing everything to propositions or statements would still leave a lot of things out, right? Like there are skills you can have, and skills are not type of like literal knowledge. They are type of like swimming or driving. Those are skills, and that is also knowledge, but you cannot formulate it in a proposition. So I would say uh, religious religious scriptures or that or any older texts are something that has like evolutionary survived too, in a way, because historically it has provided people with a way of life, with a way of engaging in the world, and not something that is supposed to be followed as a rule, something because
Okay, so
it's
I
really
don't.
complex and it cannot be.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you that there are probably many good things in the Hindu scripture that are going to give people guidance in their lives and how to live better. There's probably some things that are not so great as well, as happens in all of these scriptures. But when it comes to believing in the Vishnu or the others, I guess, I have an expectation that there's going to be some reliability on the god and goddess side of things, on the deity side. I want that there's the relationship. There has to be some reliability there, and that's why taking things literally, at least to a certain degree, to satisfy this is important to me. So it makes it very difficult for me to find it convincing when I'm told that I can't take these things literally, because then that leaves things very kind of all over the place. See, when I'm interacting with another person, I can take it literally that this is a real person. This is a human being. This person has certain characteristics, height and weight, and abilities to see or not see, or to feel things and be able to communicate with them. I can know things about them, and I can verify these things. I have this same expectation with deities. If I'm going to have some kind of relationship with a goddess or a god, I need to be able to quantify things. I need to be able to interact with them and do so at least in some kind of reliable manner. So at this point, I'm still I'm not convinced that the Hindu deities are real. But I know that it sounds like you're quite fond of them and you see a lot of value in them. And again, I don't question that part, because there probably is plenty of value to be offered from it. It's just not meeting that bar of reliability for me. Thank you.
Of course, I don't think I have like certainty about about these things. And in a way, since I'm making a perennialist move, so I would I would say that it is also a valid position that if you want to have a sort of Cartesian certainty or that sort of reliability is not possible. Uh, but I think the way that if you believe believe not in like in the propositional sense, but in a way of life sense, that you can that can manifest positive results, or which believing in them can make them real in a way. So there is a reciprocal dependence on it. It's not like
It sounds like your audio is cutting out.
they
I'm sorry.
exist because if you don't believe acting acting
Your audio is cutting out. We can't understand you because your audio had just started cutting out about 30 seconds ago. I'm sorry.
let me try to improve it. Is it better now?
It seems to be good right
Hello.
now. Yes.
Is it better now? Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm saying there's if you do it more in inactive and embedded way, then taking those psychic realities to be real would have positive results, and those results would create a virtuous cycle of having in a way. So I mean, I think even Christians have this, right? That it's not I who live, it's Christ who live in me. So that's sort of like a way to have that sort of reciprocal relationship of faith. And yeah, I mean, I would say that is in many traditions, because that way. And I mean, if you can also say for even for a simple thing like tarot readings or astrology, that they can help you. I mean, just on a pragmatic level, they can help you in decentering. And sometimes when you are overloaded with choice, then you can default to having some random, like sort of like a random generator, or I mean, like tarot reading and astrology is sort of like randomizing, but that can still have positively manifest result, because you are getting out of your own head and taking the something transcendent reality or something greater than yourself to be real, and that itself can also have a positive effect. But yeah, I know that's a pragmatic argument, but there is also a justification from like metaphysics side too, but that would be difficult to justify.
Amy or TJump, did you have anything you wanted to ask about with nothingness or nothingness?
I find the conversation fascinating. I just, he also brought up Buddhism. I find, there are a lot of atheists sometimes that get drawn. There's nothing, that says that you can't be an atheist and have a religion. Shout out to TJump's Atheist Church. And so, I'm open-minded to that type of view. It's just towards some of the literal interpretations of Hindu gods and stuff that you start to lose me. So it's a give and take.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, the astrology stuff certainly is viewed as superstitious, and I guess it's compared with astronomy, but they're very different fields. Astronomy is on the scientific side of the fence, and astrology is on the superstitious side, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm saying that astrology and even tarot readings are basically random, sort of like random generators, but they can still have a positive psychological effect, because they are decentering yourself in a way, because you are taking a perspective other than your own. You're taking so, and sometimes this is also called, like, I think, Solomon effect in psychology, that if you describe your, if you are stuck in a problem and you describe that same problem from a first, instead of first person perspective, you describe it in a third person perspective, then you can have better insights into your problem. Because I think, yeah, that's why I think people say that describe your problem as if your friend, uh, that it was not your problem but your friend's problem. So those sort of pragmatic psychological reasons would be, and I would say that religions have that to the extreme, or like, yeah, because they are giving a complete worldview, and they were basically sense making systems from the which uh, which uh, which evolutionarily also survived, because people who were followers of those religions were, because if you think about it, if there were two competing religions and they have a life or death struggle and one of them survives, the one that survives had to have some better social cohesive model than the other one.
Okay, so that's an assumption. There can be other factors why one survived and the other didn't. Like they could be in different geographies, or it could just be that the society following one versus the society following the other, one of them contracted a disease that the other one didn't contract because they're kind of at a distance. There's other factors we need to look at. So to just assume that the religion is better just because it survived, I think fails to take into consideration other factors. You mentioned psychological effects as well. Many of the psychological effects people get from partaking in religion, people can also get from other activities that are not religious. So this is not something that's exclusive to religion. So yeah, again, I'm left feeling not convinced, but I do appreciate all that you've raised here, because it is interesting. We don't usually get people on that talk much about religions aside from Christianity and Islam. So it's great to have somebody on talking about Hinduism, and appreciate your time. Did TJump or Amy, did you have anything you wanted to ask them? Talk about before we move on to our next guest?
No, just that it was a good conversation.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Good discussion. Although I had one question. So I have heard that empiricism has a self-defeating argument. So how do you guys uh, argue against that part? Because I think that's a convincing argument, but yeah, I haven't heard a good refutation of it. Because yeah, if for sense data you start with sense data, but how do you justify that you can only derive knowledge from sense data, because that claim itself is not
From sense
in the sense
data?
data, or yeah, I mean empirical knowledge or anything that's coming through
Well, I
impressions, right? That's
So
classic empirical.
all we have is our sensory data to go off of. However, that's the great thing of science, is it removes the human bias from it, or it tries to the best as possible through process.
No, but I think science is also just not empiricism, right? Science is also based on abduction, where yeah, I think, like, in the pragmatist tradition they would say that science is both doing uh, like hypothesis generation, and based on like theoretical postulation we are trying to see which fits better. So I think
What you're
that's a
asking
different.
is the people say empiricism is self-defeating. What they're saying is that empiricism claims the only true knowledge is knowledge that can be verified empirically. But that statement, knowledge can only be verified empirically as true knowledge, isn't verifiably empirically, right? So they're saying, well, therefore, self-defeating.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. First, for two reasons. One, empiricists have always granted analytic knowledge. So if you just go to logical positivism on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, it will say they grant analytic knowledge. You can know things about conceptual things just fine. But true knowledge is things that correspond to reality. Perceptual things don't correspond to reality. They correspond to your imagination. And so when they say true knowledge is the things that are only empirically verifiable, that doesn't include analytic knowledge, because analytic knowledge isn't correspondent to reality, it's correspondent to imagination. So it doesn't make a difference. Secondly, the knowledge part of a claim is just completely irrelevant to the analytic truth. So like there's the methodology of how to gain knowledge, like a science. Science isn't true. So if you're using science, you wouldn't say science is true. So the statement that only true knowledge can be gained via sense experience is the methodology. So that isn't a truth statement. It doesn't matter to the sentence. It's just phrased in a way that seems like it's a truth statement. So it's completely irrelevant in both ways, and it's not in any way addressing empiricism.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think logical positives do agree with the analytic claims, and but then, yeah, you have to be an expressivist about normativity. That any odd claim is just expressing emotions. So yeah, I mean, I don't find that view of morality compelling, but yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, of course, you can also be just a skeptic and deny knowledge altogether. So that avenue is also open. But yeah, I think that
skepticism isn't about denying things. It's about trying to ascertain whether something is reliable, and more of that. I think it's the cynics who tend to deny everything, and there are some people who do conflate cynicism with skepticism, but they are very different things.
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, colloquially I agree with you, but classical skeptics or historically like Pyrrhonians, etc. would they would just suspend all judgment. So that's like I mean yeah, there's no like non-question begging way to defeat that position, but yeah, and currently also there are like global skeptics and local skeptics, but some people claim if you are a local skeptic, then that ultimately dissolves into global skepticism. So there are arguments there, but yeah, a global skeptic would be someone who denies any knowledge altogether. So yeah, but yeah, I think politically, I think that's true that generally skeptics try to not claim absolute knowledge or like 100% reliability. So that's also a fair way to do
I'm
that.
ready to move on to the next speaker if you guys are.
So, Nothingness, thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate you taking the time to explain this to us, and we look forward to talking with you again. We do need to move on to our next guest, though. Have a great day.
You too. Have a great day. Bye.
Okay, Cinder Falls. I've invited you up. Hey, welcome. Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Doing pretty good. Thanks for asking. How's my mic?
Fantastic.
Okay. So what I want to talk about specifically is about divine hiddenness. See, I'm a Gnostic atheist. I know I do not believe in a God. And when I say God, I mean supernatural entity, because God is simply a title. And depending on the context, an arbitrary one. Got that?
Okay.
All right.
Okay, you've gone silent. I don't know if maybe your mic suddenly failed.
I'm back.
Alrighty. So you started off saying you're an agnostic atheist. Is that right?
Gnostic.
And
He said Gnostic.
Oh, Gnostic atheist. Okay. And you are just to review. You're talking about how God is an arbitrary title. Is that right? That's what I caught from you.
Correct.
I mean, there are certain gods I don't believe exist either.
Ultimately, the question I have for the audience is, whatever standard you apply, if you are a theist, whatever standard you apply to your God, does it apply? would you use that same logic on other gods? Like, for example, I've heard most theists argue that. Sorry, this is my first time doing this.
Okay.
TJump, you good?
You're asking if the standard that theists use to justify their belief in a god, would they apply it consistently to other gods? The answer is no, they don't.
Yeah, I was hoping honestly, I was hoping to interact with someone who is a theist and ask them questions regarding their faith.
And you need to go
Effectively
find a
be part of
theist
the
and
group.
send messages.
Yeah, there's the Heathen Hangout chat. You can do a text interaction. We're bringing people up on the stage who want to try to convince us deities exist, or if they have some question. Like what you're raising is an interesting point, because I do notice this happens a lot. That and TJump just answered you there correctly, I think. That a lot of the time they'll discount all the other religions and have all kinds of reasons why the other religions are wrong about their deities, and that their deities don't exist, but they make exception for their own. So I guess what you're highlighting here is the fact that an exception is being made to the standard that they require of everybody else. It's kind of almost like hypocrisy, right?
Pretty much.
It's a fair point. It's a valid point. It happens a lot. And to be fair, they're kind of stuck with a point, particularly in the Abrahamic religions, because the God of Christianity, for example, has to be the only one. There's no other gods before him. And a lot of them think of that as meaning there's no other gods or goddesses anywhere. Their God is the only one, absolutely. So, of course, it would be problematic for them to then go believe in the Hindu gods and goddesses at the same time. That would be a contradiction. So instead, they just take a preference with their own Christian god and then discount all the others.
Yeah, I completely see that. And when I talk to Christians, I ask them the following question. Okay, so there's a story in the book where the Old Testament specifically, where Elijah or Isaiah, some prophet's name with an E, goes to the disciples of Baal, and he commands them to build an altar to their god, and then he would build an altar to his god Yahweh. So the two altars would be set up. They would not be lit up by human means, but instead the true God would come down and light up the altars. What I would ask Christians is, why not use the same method for Muslims? Believe in the Old Testament God, correct?
That'd be a great test, a great question for Christians. We're not Christians. You're on the wrong stage.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's no problem. We're all atheists here. So, like I said earlier, we are welcoming people up to do this. So, yeah, those are good questions to ask. I think that's perfectly reasonable. Perhaps feel free to tune into these in the future. I think what we're going to do is probably move on to another guest here, because you're, in a sense, preaching to the choir here.
Sorry for wasting your time, guys. I'll be out.
You're not wasting our time. We appreciate you coming up and putting time and effort into this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for coming on.
All right, have a good day.
So, Stu Griffin, welcome. Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Doing all right. How about yourself?
Pretty good. What have you got for us?
All right. So I'm in a similar boat as the previous speaker, but I heard that there were no deists here. Now, I admit I'm an interesting mix. I would call myself a Gnostic atheist, agnostic deist. And I think it's because I've defined myself into a hole, where a deity would be a supernatural entity that doesn't interact with humanity personally. In that understanding, Big Bang is technically, or the singularity, what have you, is technically a deity. Doesn't have morals, doesn't have a mind, doesn't care about what I do with any part of myself. But I think that would qualify as a deity.
Well, my question actually would be why? Why make it a deity if it doesn't have a mind, if it doesn't do anything, if it's just nature? So why call that phenomena of nature God as opposed to any other?
I'm not implying that one worships the singularity. I'm only implying that it would, or I'm saying that it would fit the definition of a deity. I'm just wondering, have I defined myself into a hole?
A deity is a god or a goddess, creator or supreme being. Singularity isn't a creator. It isn't a god, has no mind. So no, it would not be a deity. You don't worship it. Doesn't meet any of the definition. If you just go to dictionary.com, it's not a deity. No.
It is, as I understand it, it is a being. Must a being have a mind?
No, but that's not what we mean by God.
And to say
God
that the Big
has mind.
Yeah, and to say the Big Bang is a deity, I think would be a very difficult thing to argue for because it looks more like an effect resulting from a long time ago from something happened. It's not the Big Bang happened. It's in our past. It's not happening now as well. But it's an effect. It's not a being, as I understand it.
And one of the problems I have with theism is generally they tend to be anthropomorphized concepts that then answer things that we just didn't know. Like, how did humans get here? Well, you can say that. How did lightning happen? Well, you can say that. How did the universe itself? It was a fill in the blank. But if we have shed so much of that we are now just looking at natural phenomena, why try to reattach that label when we've actually spent all of this time? Just, to me, it just feels like baggage. And so if it wasn't a creator, if it was just a expansion event that, while it, as far as we can tell, either our local universe or the entire thing, why not just let be physics instead of some, something else? Say it's fantastic, awesome, amazing, but not supernatural.
I agree. I agree. I don't know if it is supernatural or not. It may be that before instantiation of space-time, it's not fair to call it naturalistic laws or not. So, in that sense, being outside of our current instantiation of space-time, it might be supernatural. Again, not a mind, purely physics or applying to whatever beyond space-time rules there are, kind of like we have the laws of our space-time instantiation.
So the consensus in physics is that space and time is emergent from something else, which is also physical and natural. So doesn't need to be in space time to be physical or natural.
Agreed. It does.
It's just another physics thing, just like every other physics thing.
I think we're getting I think the contrapositive is wrong here. I'm not saying
my question is, what does calling it a deity do? Like, what for you, for me, what do we get out of it instead of just completely shedding that concept entirely?
An acknowledgement that there is still an unknown, an answer to the question of where did we ultimately come from, and I do believe the answer boils down to physics. I really do. I just don't know the physics.
We grant that there's something that's unknown. Why are you labeling that unknown deity? That seems like the opposite. That seems like you're saying, oh, look, a UFO, an unidentified flying object. It must be aliens. Like, why are you labeling it aliens? It's unidentified. That's a contradiction. So if you're saying there's this unknown thing in physics, totally agree. Everybody in physics agrees. But then you're labeling that thing a deity. That makes no sense. That's a contradiction.
I would say the analogy is off. You're pointing at a thing and you are identifying it as an unidentified flying object. There, I would say there's a contradiction. You are putting the label on the thing as an unidentified flying object, not therefore an alien. That's a third step. I only think I'm going 2 steps. Singularity, deity.
Deity
Nothing
isn't an unknown object. Deity is a god. If you just want to give it like dark matter, dark energy, that's fine. If you want to call it a deity, that doesn't work because we have definitions and properties to which the word deity applies. So then it's no longer unknown. If you want to call it unknown, you have to use a name or a label that has no defined properties. If you're using a label that has defined properties, it's not unknown. It's like calling it aliens.
And yet you just said unidentified flying object, which has 2 identifying properties along with it. So
you can
it's
literally
both
see it
unknown
flying.
and
So
known.
the flying there is an observable thing. So if we could observe an unidentified origin object, fine. You call it an unidentified origin object. That's fine.
If that's the word definition where we have to say it, how is that different from a singularity? And I guess I'm also...
Singularities have lots of different properties, but deity does not work. Deity fails to be that thing because deity has properties of God. Deity is synonymous with God, but so deity would not be an appropriate label for that thing. Unknown origin thingy, sure. Singularity, there's lots of properties for singularities, so that's like more of an actually known answer to what that is. But deity does not work.
All right.
You mentioned earlier that you are both atheist and theist.
No, Gnostic, atheist, agnostic, deist.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I like any sort of personal deity that has a relationship with humanity. Yeah, no, that was a fever dream, ayahuasca, bedtime story that got blown out of proportion. No contest here. It is the deity, because I was understanding a supreme being to be essentially supreme object, kind of like the most perfect pizza, most perfect island, most perfect being sort of argument, but not perfect, just most original, most back in time.
Okay. You did define yourself into a circle, though. So a deism, deistic God, is a subset of theism. So if you're a Gnostic atheist, that would mean you also have to be a Gnostic deist, because deism is like roses and theism is like flowers.
If that's how we understand it, then I have gotten myself mixed up. I interpreted it the other way, that theism was a subset of deism.
Theism is a God who doesn't interact. Theism is any God, any kind.
Yeah, and there are some deists who think the deity just lost interest or is doing something else, and there's other deists who believe that that deity is gone, it died or something, it got destroyed. So that does happen in the deist circles, I find.
Yeah. All right. Well, if I just had my definitions mixed up, then thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate your time.
No problem. Feel free to join us again in the future. I think we're pretty much at the end of this. We do appreciate your time too, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good conversation.
Now, the Snowy Banana is interested in coming back. Do we want to talk with Snowy Banana again?
There's Not Fox, which looks like Foxy the presuppositionalists.
Oh, there. Yeah, Not Fox disappeared, and then Not Fox hasn't had a chance yet. We'll bring them up first.
They still make presuppositionalists?
Hello, Not
I think
Fox.
They were discontinued. Discontinued in 1999.
Not Fox, if you'd like to join us, we're ready for you. We're ready to receive. Okay, so I guess what we'll do is we'll bring up the Snowy Banana for another chat. Just a moment here. The Snowy Banana? Hello again. Been a little
Hey.
while since we've talked. What's on your mind now?
So obviously, y'all would probably agree that if there was some sort of being that was like a creator being created all of the universe and all that, all of reality, that would be called a god. What? I mean, but I would also assume you would think that something that didn't create the universe but exists within it, but has a certain amount of power and ability, could still be called a god reasonably. I would assume. Is that the case or no?
Possibly like Thor or something.
Yeah. Okay. So then I would say like, okay, what's like the minimum level to where you would say, okay, that thing is a god, where you would look at it, you would see its qualities, and you'd be like, you know what, that is worthy of being referred to as a god.
I would require created literally everything else, so I wouldn't call Thor a god, just by convenience.
Okay, well, so then you would say like, no, like that would not be.
I just say
So
Thor
wouldn't
is
be a god.
a super powerful organism.
Right. What about Randolph or Amy?
Well, in essence, I agree with what TJump saying. Things become to have superpowers, and then the big G we're talking about is just a specific superpower, and that is creating universes, if not our own universe.
Yeah, that's where the omni properties start to come into the conversation. So there's the omniscience and the omnipotence and other things as well. It's just I think that some kind of supernatural power controlling everything is definitely something that would qualify as a deity. But it would also need that characteristic of, I guess, having some semblance of consciousness, because it's making conscious decisions to do these things. I think me and Amy and TJump are probably generally in agreement.
Okay, so like something it's something basically does have to have the power of like creating universes. Anything, it can't be like you wouldn't refer to something as a deity if it did not have that ability. Even if it, let's say it could create a planet and it could populate the planet with life, you still wouldn't refer to that as a deity. Just
okay. So you were asking about, it sounded like you were asking about monotheism, and and to clarify, I think we need to branch into this a little bit. When it comes to the polytheistic religions, there's very often deities have different duties and different capabilities, and so there are still goddesses and gods. They just have specific kind of abilities. Some of them just look after weather, some look after procreation, some look after family matters, some of them farming, on and on the list goes. So it's just it's not a simple black and white term. And this is one of the reasons why we ask theists to tell us about their deity before we are going to be willing to consider it as something that we'll be convinced by. Now, if somebody just says, oh, this cat has gone and created a whole bunch of kittens, so therefore that cat is a goddess. Well, no, we're unlikely to accept that. Now, if that goddess was floating around that cat was floating around in space and doing that out there, that might be a little bit more interesting, because there's another characteristic there. And if they're capable of traveling through time because they're omnichronological, okay, this is starting to look more deity-like.
Wait, cats can't do that?
Okay, there's obviously something I don't know about cats then.
Right, and that's kind of basically like what I was saying is I'm not talking about like just monotheistic, but just any sort of being, minimum level characteristics, minimum amount of power, where you as an individual would be comfortable at pointing at it and saying, you know what, I am comfortable calling that a god.
This is a tricky thing, because there are, let's say there's 20 different points of criteria. If 5 or 6 of them are present, then that could be enough to qualify it. So it's not a black and white proposition. Go ahead, Amy.
Well, no, most of the propositions that we get, the vast majority of theists, are this Abrahamic branch. And these Abrahamic branches have very specific qualities. They're what we deal with the most. Now, there are, pagan gods, there are pantheistic gods. There's a whole bunch of other ways that theists slice it, but it tends to be this agency that I just don't think seems, we don't have evidence it exists. And so, yeah, I just feel like if you're trying to find some sort of like creator, well, we are those creators. There could be a planet that was created, and we would maybe tempted to call them their god. I would say that was the natural creation because that's the only beings we know that can.
I'm curious, TheSnowyBanana, do you have a set of criteria that must all match, or some of them must match to qualify as a deity?
There's a set of criteria that I think, like, if it had that ability, then you could probably say it somewhat comfortably. It's maybe not a very powerful god, but something that you could probably classify as a god. And then you could also say, like, it's a god, but it's only a god to these other beings, but not to these other beings. So, like, the ability to, I guess, maybe create life to some degree. Things like that. Like, for instance, I don't know if any of you have ever read the short story, I Have No Mouth, and I Must Scream. No? Well, in that it posits the existence. It doesn't posit anything. It's a fictional short story, but one of the characters is basically this giant supercomputer that was created by humans, but ended up destroying all human life. But it now has control over the entire planet, and it can kind of manufacture new creatures, and it can basically grant biological immortality to humans and things like that. And it's like, well, it's so powerful, but it doesn't have. It also doesn't have like total free will. Like, for instance, it can't destroy itself because it was programmed not to do that. But it has all this power, but it's also limited in certain ways. It's like, at what point is it like, okay, is this now a computer god, or is this not, or is it just a computer that has a lot of pretty interesting abilities? And it's like, I don't know. You could say, like, it's kind of a god in a way. Like, it certainly has a lot of abilities that, say, a Hindu god might have, that even though it doesn't have all of the abilities that, say, the Abrahamic god or some other type of deity in another religion would have. Like, it has a lot of amazing abilities that we would say are rather fantastical. And it's like, you could call it a god. I don't know if necessarily I would. I mean, if I existed in that world, I would, because if it asked me to, I would, because, I don't want to be destroyed by this mega computer. Like, if an immortal alien came to Earth with a giant laser and said, hey, you need to call me God, or I'm going to blow up the planet, I'm going to call it God. I mean, I would.
Yeah.
You would agree that if someone came up to probably any one of us and said, call me a god or I'm going to shoot you, it would be like, all hail Bob, or whoever is standing in front of us.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think most people would probably prefer not to get shot.
And then I guess it just comes down to, like, do you believe it when you say it? And
No, absolutely no. We don't. Well, that's
now. What if this alien with the giant super laser is now he's able to create new life? He can manufacture new life, because we have human science.
I wanted to ask you a very specific thing. Are parents gods?
No, but I think there's a difference between manufacturing life just through, like, other processes that you don't necessarily have total control over, versus, like, consciously going and putting together the materials to manufacture that life.
And so, are parents creators?
Creators in a certain sense, yes.
And so, thus, we have creators without gods.
Yeah.
And so, sure. I guess my whole point would be, why do we have to just label whatever the parent is something? Why do we have to call that entity a god?
I guess that's my question, is like, what it would be like what are the minimum things that a thing has to have, a thing or a collection of things have to have for you you specifically as an individual to be comfortable calling it a god? That's basically all I was asking. And you basically answered it by saying, like, well, it has to have created basically everything, which in that case, I mean,
Well, I mean, I can imagine a superpower where their whole power is to create other universes. But would you call but once again, should I worship? Should I revere this person? That gets into a whole nother territory. If the Christian God did exist and they had everything that we've been trying to grant, I still wouldn't worship that person because I would think they were, unless they could justify everything they did to me, not did to me, to the, basically to the universe, all these horrible planet burning things. I don't think I'd be able to worship them.
Would you be able to worship a god that was not all powerful and did not create the universe, but was generally benevolent and tried to do what was best?
I could respect an agent that was trying to do good things, just like I could respect any other agent that's trying to do good things.
Okay, so what criteria would have to be met for you to be like, you know what, that thing is worthy of worship. I'm going to worship that being.
Oh, I have a very specific joke, which is only your partner or anything you're in bed with. But generally speaking, you shouldn't. You shouldn't worship things.
Just anything across the board.
I can't think of something that you would literal worship.
I'm on the same page with Amy on this because to me, worship is a way of giving up a part of your own sovereignty, and I'm very much in favor of promoting the idea that each person is their own master, or at least should be to the greatest degree possible, and decide for themselves on things. And worship seems to me to be something that practice that gives all of that up. Why give that up? Why give up your freedom? Why give up your sovereignty?
TJump, any thoughts on that?
Nope.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. Going back to the alien with the big super laser, if he was able to not only blow up Earth, but also then capture your consciousness and put it into some sort of computer and just torture you for eternity after the fact. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if he asked me to worship him, not only am I going to call him God, but yeah, sure, I'll worship him to avoid being tortured for eternity.
But there's a difference there, because we often try to point out that the God that's trying to convince us is doing so with a big bat. Like, we often are like, hey, just come down and say hi to us, and we will, we'll believe. But what happens is they just will say, we'll kill you. We'll find you after death. Oh, you just wait. Once you die, you'll find out. So it's just threats.
Right, yeah. But so then the difference there is not necessarily that, that is not the threat, but it's whether or not you think the threat is credible. And, obviously, the Abrahamic God, probably not credible. But, giant alien, massive ship hovering over planet Earth, big laser, that's a little bit more credible, I think. I would be like, I don't know. I might get down on my hands and knees and praise Zod over here.
That's a different argument, though. But I get you. Any being, but once again, could just be someone on the street in an alleyway.
I could overpower just random guy on the street in the alleyway.
Well, I mean, okay. So then, multiple people with guns in a street.
I don't know. We'll see. Jackie Chan probably could. He's pretty good. But yeah, no. I was basically just wondering what the minimum criteria is. But if y'all are setting the minimum criteria, having created everything, then that's a different question entirely.
Yeah, that is one criteria. It's not necessary, as I pointed out with polytheism as one example for why that's not necessary. But a deity doesn't have to be a creator deity, but it's certainly, if it is a creator deity, like it does have that creation capability, then of course that makes an easy case to say that that's a deity. It's just some of them you have to work a little harder to qualify it. I think is kind of where we're at on this.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's again, that's kind of what I was pointing at is for the polytheistic things, it's like where would you specifically, in your personal opinion, draw the line at? Okay, this kind of being is a deity. This kind of being is not a deity.
Yep. Sounds good. Thank you for joining us. It looks like TJump had to go, and I think, did you have anything else you wanted to add, or should we just kind of move on?
That's really all I was wondering.
Thank you very much. So, thank you everybody for tuning in. Do appreciate it. A special thanks goes to the Politics Discord for hosting these, making these stages available to us for this Theist Helpline project. This program, to get onto the Politics Discord, it's at www.politics.gg/ it's www.discord.gg/politics, and the link is also in the video description and whatnot. Before we go here, it looks like one more person is wanting to join us. Oh no, they've taken themselves out of the queue. So before we go here, just because it's just you and me here, Amy, did you have any final thoughts before we close things down?
Yes, I just wanted to say one last thing about these types of gods that would brutally torture, because I actually have I live a decent life. I am very lucky to live in this time period, but this god very specifically has condemned a giant portion of good people, not just LGBT community, but basically anyone that doesn't toe line to their exact denomination is going to burn forever and ever and ever. I don't think humans really can appreciate that time period. And so I would need some explaining to be done from this god to truly, I don't really like the term worship, but to truly respect them, to maybe possibly have an understanding of what they did in stories like Noah, or how they could have such a horrible torture pit, would have to be at least thoroughly explained. Please show me the 4D chess, because we're just simple, humans. And yeah, just wanted to put that on there. But it was another great show. I want to thank everyone, Ix and TJump and Taco and you, Randolph, for having all of us here, and thank you for all the panel for coming on.
That's great. And if you're interested in seeing Amy Newman's channel on YouTube, you can go to www.youtube.com/Amy Newman, NEWMAN. Yeah, thank you.
Randolph.
Yeah, thank you, Amy, for everything you do. There's more information on the Theist Helpline website at www.theisthelpline.com, and if you take a look in the hosts section, you can find everybody's links. There's other resources there that are also useful. Thank you to everybody in our audiences for tuning in today. We host this. This is live on Discord as well as on YouTube, and we always look forward to doing this on a monthly basis. We hope that most of you, or if not all of you, will tune in again next month, and feel free to invite your friends and other people you know who may be interested in this program, in this show. So with that, I think I'm going to bring this to an end. Again, happy Canada Day to everybody for July 1st and the upcoming July 4th. Happy USA Day, I guess. Happy 4th of July. Take care, everybody.
Happy carbs and meat days.
Yes. Take care, everybody. Now I just have to figure out how to close this.
You could probably just leave, and then I'll just be the guy in charge.
Oh, great. Well, thank you very much. And I hope I didn't forget to mention the Politics Discord.
You did. Thank you so much.
Great. And thank you very much for all that you do for us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Have a nice day.
You too.
Okay, so now that he's gone, I want to talk about my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So I have your attention. I'm kidding. I don't fucking know. Get out of here. Leave. I don't know how to close the channel.
That was hilarious. Have a great day.